Morning, ladies and gentlemen, councillors joining the Scrutiny Commission this morning. My name's Simon Galton. I'm going to begin the meeting now, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. As is usual, this meeting is being broadcast live by the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Due to the current situation, all members of the Commission and officers presenting are joining online today. Can I please ask that everyone mute their microphone until they wish or are invited to speak? If you're able to use your video camera, please turn it on for the duration of the meeting. If members or officers wish to speak, please ensure you raise your hand, use the flag function and not the chat facility. So before we commence the meeting formally, I'm now going to ask the members to introduce themselves. I understand there are no substitutes today. So starting with Mr. Barclay, please. Are you on mute?
Good morning, Chair. Apologies. My name's Tom Berkeley. I'm County Councillor for Syce and Ridgeway.
Thank you. Mr. Bedford.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Bedford here, one of the 4 Scrutiny Commissioners and County Councillor for Markfield, Desford and Thornton.
Thank you. Mr. Bill.
Good morning, Chairman. David Bill here, County Councillor for the Hollycroft Division of Hinckley.
Thank you. Mr. Bolter.
Good morning, everybody. Bill Bolter, County Councillor for South Wixton and Wixton West.
Thank you, Bill. Dr. Inan.
Hello, I'm the County Councillor for Colville North and one of the 4 Scrutiny Commissioners, Terry Inan.
Thank you, Terry. Dr. Feltham.
Morning, Kevin Feltham here. I'm the County Councillor for the Gartree Division.
Thank you, Kevin. Mrs. Fryer.
Good morning, Hilary Fryer here, County Councillor for Quorn and Barrow.
Thank you, Hilary. Mr. Harrison.
Hello, good morning. It's Dan Harrison here, County Councillor for Ibstock and Appleby.
Thank you, Dan. Mrs. Page.
Good morning, Rosita Page, County Councillor for Lutterworth and one of the 4 Scrutiny Commissions and Vice Chairman of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosita. Mr. Pearson.
Alan Pearson, County Councillor for Melton West. Hello, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Mr. Richardson.
Good morning, Terry Richardson, County Councillor for Narborough and Whetstone.
Thank you, Terry. Mr. White, I know is not here. We don't record apologies formally, but he did let me know he was unable to attend today due to a previous commitment. Right, so moving to the agenda, appointment to chairman. This is a formality because this is done at the County Council meeting, which I know seems a long time ago, but I would ask members to note that I was appointed chairman of the Scrutiny Commission in accordance with Article 6.05 of the County Council's Constitution. Election of vice chairman. So I'm going to ask for nominations. I understand Mrs. Page will be proposed. Mr. Bedford.
Thank you.
Peter, you're muted.
It's all gone pear-shaped.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I've got no hesitation in proposing that Rosita Page be elected as the Vice Chairman of this committee.
Thank you. Dr. Feltham, you've got your hand up. Are you seconding?
I would like to second Mrs. Page. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other nominations? There are no other nominations, so I'm going to assume that Mrs. Page has the support of the Commission and is elected the Vice Chairman for the rest of this council year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosita. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of June. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of June are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Are you all in agreement that I signed them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nod will be fine. Yeah. Thank you very much. Question time. I've not received any questions at this meeting. Item 5, questions raised by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. There are none today. 6, to advise of any items that need to be taken as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. There are no urgent items today. Item 7, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. I'll assume the usual blanket declaration of members that are dual-hatted, if you're a member of a district council or a member of a parish council. Are there any other issues that need to be declared? Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to note, probably relates more to agenda item 11 than anything, that I am a board director of the LEP.
Oh, who cares?
And I'm also deputy chairman of the members advisory group.
Yes. Okay. So you're not declaring a prejudicial interest. You're
no, it's non-pecuniary interest.
Asking us to know. Okay.
Yes,
thank
please.
you, Terry.
Thank you.
Terry Einan.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to declare a non-pecuniary, non-prejudicial interest as a member of Colville Heritage Society with reference to the item 10 on place marketing.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other interests? Right. Item 8, declarations of the party whip. Assume there are none. Item 9, presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. There are no petitions today. Before we move on to consider the substantive items on the agenda, can I please ask members to allow officers to present the report before seeking to ask questions? It just helps in the online situation. And then if you've got a question, please use the raise your hand flag and I will call you one at a time. I can't guarantee you that I'll be able to call you in the order you raised your hand, because all I know is that you've raised your hand rather than who did it first, but I will make sure I get to everyone. So the first item this morning, item 10, is place marketing, Leicester and Leicestershire. We are going to have a presentation on this, but we're going to start with some opening comments by Simon Lawrence, the head of the Growth and Major Programmes Unit within the Council. There'll then be a presentation by Mark Oakley, the Director of Inward Investment and Place Marketing. There will be slides uploaded onto everyone's screen and viewable on the webcast. First of all, can I check, I know we've checked that our guests are here. Can I check that Simon Lawrence is here, please?
I am, Mr. Galton, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, yes, if we could start off then, if you'd like to make some opening comments on the background of this report.
OK, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I shall be brief and I'll hand over to Mark in a moment. So Mark's the Director of Inward Investment and Place Marketing, and he'll be presenting the report, which is very welcome to come to the Commission as an opportunity to update you on the work of the Place Marketing Organisation. And as the report says, and as background and as a reminder to members, the Place Marketing team is jointly funded by the City and the County Council to deliver place marketing, inward investment and strategic tourism services across Leicester and Leicestershire. And the work of the team, which is led by Mark on behalf of both the City and the County, is overseen by the Place Marketing Coordination Group, alternately chaired by Tom Purnell, who Assistant Chief Executive, who unfortunately can't be here today for the County Council, and also his equivalent at the City, effectively Mike Dalzell, who's the Director of Tourism, Culture and Inward Investment at the City Council. So I welcome the opportunity for the report to come forward, and unless there's any other questions of me before Mark starts, I'll sort of hand over to Mark, who'll present the report, who's presented to you in the past on other matters, so he'll no doubt introduce himself and you'll be familiar with him. I'll now just upload his slides, Chair.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Chair. It's Mark Oakley speaking. I'm the Director of Inward Investment and Place Marketing, as Simon outlined. I have reported previously to the Scrutiny Committee, And hopefully what we've done with the presentation and certainly the report today is provided a latest update in terms of some of the performance and activity of the team, but also to build on some of the questions that were raised at the scrutiny meeting last time. So hopefully you'll be comfortable with the way that we've done that. I'm not driving my slide deck today. Simon's in charge. So please bear with me while we're just trying to get that working properly. So if Simon, are you able to put it on as a larger slide at all, as a slideshow?
I've attempted to do that. Has that not worked?
Not on my screen.
Simon, if you click enable editing at the top, and then you should be able to put the slideshow on properly then.
Oops. Excuse me, just having a couple of technical issues.
Not to worry, these things do.
Yeah, that's not there. We go.
Do you want me to have a go, Simon?
You might. I tried this prior to the meeting and it worked perfectly fine.
Yeah, it always does in a rehearsal, and then it doesn't work on the day.
I'm putting it up now. It should just be popping up on everybody's screen, and then Simon, if you want to just take control when it's up.
Okay.
Nothing seems to be happening. Is everybody see it, or?
No.
So it was there.
Yeah, should I try again, Joe? Apologies, Chair.
And then it disappeared.
It is in the agenda pack. So if you want to just make a start, you can work on the basis of what's in the agenda pack anyway.
I've got.
No.
Go. Leave it at that.
Oh. Okay, well, if members are comfortable, if I just start while we're...
It starts on page 29 in the agenda pack.
It comes on and then just removes itself, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, well, I suggest, Mark, that you start the presentation. Just so we understand, are you doing the entire presentation?
Yes.
Okay. It's back.
Well, the slide's there.
Simon, you've got an echo.
So it is there. So I would continue, Mark.
Okay. Simon, if you could just go to the next slide then, please. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay, apologies, it's a little bit small on the screen, and there is some echo. I don't know whether anyone's got their microphone still on. That seems a little bit better, certainly from my end. Okay, so what I've done, perfect, thank you. So what I've done here is really just to recap in terms of the team and what the team do and who we are effectively. We're a small team based within Leicester City Council offices, or we were, and the main overarching objective of the team is to basically attract visitors and investors into Leicester and Leicestershire, working alongside the private and public sector partners. There are three key areas that we work within that Simon outlined earlier in terms of inward investment, strategic tourism, and then sort of to a certain extent a central support and promotion role in terms of place marketing that supports attracting investment and tourism. The capacity of the team has increased since we last reported to Scrutiny. Within the team itself, we have two secondees effectively from the County Council, Oliver Whitaker, and Oliver joined us just over a year ago now. and Sally Coleman, who you'll be aware of previously and would have met previously because she reported on the tourism growth plan at the end of last year. In addition to that, since the last meeting, a lady called Salma Manzoor has recently joined us, driving something that's called the Key Account Programme, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. And a lady called Samantha Hall has joined us as our business tourism manager, leading on a project as well. So we've got two people that are specifically leading on key projects. As of last week, we were fortunate enough to be joined by a lady called Susan Littlemore, who is a highly experienced place marketer, and she joined last week to help develop some of the initiatives and projects that I'll talk through in terms of the presentation. So, Simon, if you could change the slide, please. What I've done in the next two slides is really just to highlight some of the key achievements during last financial year, so effectively 2019-20. We worked very closely as part of the Tourism Advisory Board to lead and develop the Tourism Growth Plan that was approved and launched in October 2019. And as I said previously, the Scrutiny Committee commented, and hopefully we feel that we've best able embrace those comments that are fed into Scrutiny to develop and shape the Tourism Growth Plan. Over the past year, the tourism performance for Leicester and Leicestershire has actually improved in terms of figures compared with 2018. Obviously, we do have some challenges ahead in terms of tourism performance for 2020 and beyond. As part of the work that the team do, we've started developing two key strands of our tourism growth plan, one of which is Uncover the Story, and the other is the business tourism service that we're developing. And the slides on those a little bit later. And from a proactive management of our websites, we've managed to now attract, certainly in last financial year, we managed to get over 500,000 new users. So there are new people visiting the site that hadn't previously to our website, and introduced a new e-newsletter. And what that does is it effectively tries to signpost people to our website that have said that, yes, they're happy to find out more about Leicester and Leicestershire as a place to visit. Next slide, please, Simon. From an investment perspective, we've worked or received in last financial year around over 200 new business inquiries, and effectively what they are businesses that we've worked with looking for either new space to grow their business, to relocate to the area, to relocate within the area. And we've worked alongside not only those inquiries, but also inquiries that we'd received in previous years, because it's not all delivered within one financial year. We've been looking at and developing very much our toolkit in terms of how we promote Leicester and Leicestershire, and engaged a company called Hatchery Generous to support development of that collateral, and we're working through that at the moment. We've established a new LinkedIn page that is a very good, cost-effective way of trying to showcase what's hot and only what's hot within Leicester and Leicestershire, to make people better aware of the place from a business investment perspective. We have been working hard with Department of International Trade, and last year we managed to get something called a high potential opportunity, which very basically is the Department for International Trade looking at a sector and helping promote it internationally. So we've been working with them throughout last year on space, and we've recently had the approval to work forward with one in the rehabilitation healthcare area, and that's something that Oliver Whitaker has been working on. We've also updated our sites map, and this is the map that was produced and circulated at the last meeting. We've done a latest version for 2020 that basically showcases those key employment sites within Leicester and Leicestershire that are currently being marketed, so that we can better raise the profile of those when we're working with our partners and private sector investors. And as I said earlier, the Key Account Management Programme has just kick-started. What this is we received some funding through from Department for International Trade to work with those companies that are already in Leicester and Leicestershire that are effectively foreign owned, to grow that foreign investment within our patch. Next slide, please, Simon. At the last scrutiny committee that I reported to, there was a question about some of the performance indicators. So hopefully this has started to answer some of those questions in terms of those figures that we are collecting and reporting against, and how we're performing against our targets. The number of inquiries, there are 3 sections that we're reporting under. One's inward investment, one's strategic tourism, and one's place marketing. Within the inward investment side, we capture the number of inquiries that we're receiving, and we don't split that into city and county, because what we try to do is make sure that when an inquiry comes through, we're putting forward as many of the opportunities within Leicester and Leicestershire as possible. And often businesses don't really see those administrative boundaries anyway, so we're just trying to reflect the requirements of the business, so it's specifically targeted around that. The jobs created and safeguarded is very much about where the business has landed, and not really about where the employees are based. So if, for example, we secure a investment in the city, some of those jobs are likely to be in Leicestershire, they might be in Nottinghamshire. We don't control that, obviously. We just try to work to secure that investment. So effectively, those jobs created are location specific to the businesses we've been working with, rather than actually where the people may live. And as you'll be aware, the actual creation of jobs and safeguarding of jobs is actually what the businesses do, not what we do. We simply signpost, support, try to attract, enable where we can for that to come forward as best we can. From a tourism perspective, what I've included here is we monitor this data called STEAM data, and that gives an indication of the value of tourism and number of visitors to the city and county. And we've got a breakdown there of the figures that have only recently been released relating to Leicester and Leicestershire for 2019, and that is up on previous years. And what that does is really helps us to benchmark where we are against other locations, and understand the direction of travel. So that's the real benefit that we have in relation to that, and I'm sure Sally will be able to update people on that if we need to later. From a place marketing perspective, we have two main websites, and the Visit one managed to secure, certainly in last financial year, a good number of new users. The first quarter of 2020 has not been as good, and we are looking at, and well, we've already introduced ways of driving that back up, and we certainly seem to be back on track to getting the level of new users that we previously were achieving, which is good news. The investment website is more targeted in terms of its end users, because it's very much geared towards those businesses that are thinking about relocating rather than visitors more generally. And with the new website that we're looking to launch in the coming months, we're hoping that that figure should be increased quite significantly. One of the things that we introduced last year was our LinkedIn page, and we exceeded the forecast for that, but it's because of the proactive engagement that we put in place around it, and I'll talk about that shortly. Simon, next slide, please. So from a tourism perspective, as we all know, COVID has had a severe impact on our tourism and hospitality sector, and from figures from Visit Britain, forecast spend is going to be significantly lower, and we don't really know what the future holds in relation to that, because everything is still changing. In terms of a response to that, we've worked very heavily, and this is something that Sally Coleman's been leading on alongside other colleagues. We've introduced a tourism recovery framework that builds on the tourism growth plan that was only adopted at the end of 2019. But what we've done was we've looked at it and said, well, how do we need to adjust it, amend it, reflect changes? And the way that we've developed that has been very much led and championed by the Tourism Advisory Board, which is a private sector-led board that we effectively facilitate and help steer. The approach of the Tourism Recovery Framework has come forward very much as a standards-led approach to recovery, and very much building on visitor confidence, because it seems that confidence is the key to getting things back on track where we can. Three of the three areas that I think are worthwhile mentioning particularly relate to some of the work that the Tourism Advisory Board are doing themselves through the work that Sally's engaging is through knowledge sharing. We have been having meetings a couple a month with some of our key attractions and also hotel providers that form part of the Tourism Advisory Board, where they're sharing knowledge, understanding, information about how best to deal with the scenario that we have been through or are going through, together with a range of different webinars that have been put on highlighting the support that is available for the sector, because there is, or has been, and is,
I think you've frozen, Mark. Hello?
Chair?
Yes.
If Mark's frozen, would it be appropriate to ask Sally just to present the strategic tourism slides in his temporary absence? Would that be okay with
yes, if it's
you,
just
Chair,
Mark,
and Sally? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Is it just Mark who's affected as far as we know? Are you there, Sally?
Yes, I'm there. Yes. So
okay, so it looks like it's just Mark. So could you pick up?
I'll pick up for you. Yes, that's fine.
Thanks,
Sally.
So yes, we've been talking about the tourism recovery framework and how we've been using that as a standard-led approach to recovering the tourism sector. I'll just move on to perhaps one of the things that Mark mentioned was the importance of restoring consumer confidence. And we've been aligning with the Visit Britain campaigns, including We're Good to Go, which is an industry safety standard designed to kind of restore consumer confidence in our tourism products. And we've been pushing this out and we have over 200 tourism businesses across Leicester and Leicestershire that have signed up and achieved that quality mark, and that is absolutely key to restoring consumer confidence in getting people to go back out and visit our attractions and go back to our hotels. We've also been aligning with the Visit England Know Before You Go campaign, which is about encouraging people to get out and about, but also to check websites to see what's open, what special arrangements have been put in place before people visit. And that obviously spreads our reach much wider if we align with a national campaign, because we can benefit from the work that Visit Britain do. And generally raising awareness of tourism and hospitality reopenings on our websites. And still working on kind of various projects to stimulate demand in the leisure and business tourism sector, which is a new sector for us, stimulating demand in that. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so these are just some of the ways that we've been trying to help stimulate consumer demand, because a lot of it is around confidence. It's around making sure people are aware of what's open and what's not, and that has been quite challenging with the Leicester lockdown and local lockdowns. The tourism, the visitor sector has been opening in a kind of phased approach. So some places remain closed for various reasons, whilst others are open. So it's been kind of mixed messaging about some places are safe to visit and able to visit, and others are closed. So it's been a little bit challenging. So We're Good to Go feature has helped to encourage people to know that they're safe. And we've been sending out newsletters, as Mark said before, and just sort of having to be aware really of that sensitivity around the Leicester local lockdown and yet promoting the county attractions that are open that really need the visitors. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we're just going to come on to Uncover the Story. Now, Uncover the Story is our destination marketing campaign. What's really important to Leicester and Leicestershire, and this is something I mentioned when we were launching brought the tourism growth plan to Scrutiny Committee last year, is that we become a more distinctive and visible destination, and we really establish an identity in the marketplace and differentiate ourselves as a tourism destination. And we've chosen Uncover the Story as our campaign to really distinguish ourselves in the marketplace. So we know that domestic tourism is really going to recover first before international tourism, and we think that Uncover the Story is really well placed to capitalise on promoting our tourism offer to a national market. So we've been engaging with our business stakeholders. So we had an initial workshop with what we identified as our 15 key businesses to work on development of their stories and really support this campaign. Unfortunately, that happened in February, and then we had the pandemic, which has really interrupted the work, but that has now resumed, and we've re-engaged the businesses, and we've got a number of key stories that have been completed, and the momentum is really gathering now that we've actually started the campaign. We've got lots of businesses that want to be involved, so it's been very successful from that point of view. So if I can just perhaps give you a flavour of some of the stories we've developed, because it's difficult as a concept to perhaps understand without seeing some of the visuals. So if I could have the next slide, please. So this is an example of how the campaign will look visually. So we've got an icon there. It says Uncover the Story. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, it says Uncover the Story in a sort of speech bubble. So that's the visual identity for the campaign. And what we do is we have a strong image of one of our attractions, and then what we're calling a teaser sentence, which encourages people to find out more about the story behind the attraction. And that's really what makes us special. It's these stories behind the attraction rather than perhaps just promoting it as an outdoor attraction. So the Foxton Locks one, we've got the engineering masterpiece that unlocks the imagination. So Foxton Locks are absolutely unique, the longest, steepest staircase of locks in the UK. And it's a wonderful place to spend time outdoors, explore your local history and spend quality time. So the story that sits behind that is all about why it's unique and why it's a wonderful place to visit. So if I could move on to the next slide, please. So Great Central Railway. This is a lovely image of one of the steam trains going over the viaduct. What we're saying here is the railway follows the route of Thomas Cook's first ever excursion from Leicester to Loughborough. We are known as an area as the birthplace of popular tourism, so we're capitalising on that story of national interest, international interest, and teasing people with the line, a day return to the birthplace of popular tourism. And then the story that sits behind that about Thomas Cook and obviously the railway itself sits on the Visit Leicester website. So these teaser sentences are designed to drive people to the website where they'll find a lot more about other attractions, other stories, and all about the area. If I could have the next slide, please. Perhaps we're frozen. If I just kind of talk, unfortunately you're not going to be able to see the visual. So we've got another slide that you'll see in your packs for the National Forest. So it's a really stunning image of the National Forest, and the story behind that is the first forest for 1,000 years. 9 million trees have been planted since the early 1990s, which have really transformed the former mining area and created rich habitats for wildlife. And it's a natural playground with lots of things to do, walking, cycling, the Timber Festival. So that's the story that sits behind the stunning image of the National Forest. And then the last one we've chosen is really to illustrate the fact that it's not just the really major attractions that can get behind the campaign, but the smaller ones too. So we've chosen the Tithe Barn restaurant in Cosby in Blaby district, which is a fabulous place to eat. It's a thatched timber framed building located in a conservation area next to a 14th century church. The village itself, extremely historic, roots dating back to the Domesday Book, and it really showcases the story behind those fabulous buildings, and yet promotes a restaurant. So it makes that restaurant something very special because of the history behind it. So that's the idea of the Uncover the Story, is that it teases people to find out all the fascinating facts behind and the very big stories behind our wonderful attractions, and it just makes them a little bit more distinctive. Can I have the next slide, please?
Thank you, Sally.
Oh, okay.
I managed to my sincere apologies for that. My computer needed to restart for whatever reason. So thank you very much, Sally, for stepping in there. Really, really useful. That I just saw the end of that part. So thank you, Sally. Chair, are you okay if I just continue?
Yeah. How much more have you got?
Not much. So we're working hard to raise awareness from a travel trade and tour organizer perspective. And what we've got with the next two slides is basically an extract from a new Midlands waterway guide that's been produced. There are 23 experiences in Leicester and Leicestershire that have been included to attract visitors and help showcase our patch as part of Visit Britain and Discover England Fund. Simon, can you go to the next slide? And this one, apologies that you can't read it very well, but what it really does is show that what we're doing is we're managing to put e-bike tours in the National Forest alongside Bear Grylls adventures in Solihull. So it just shows what we're doing in terms of some of the travel trade work to try to get the patch on their radar effectively. Simon, for the next slide. We've been really busy working and developing our business tourism service. And as I said earlier, appointed Sam Hall, who's an highly experienced business tourism conference organising event person. We have 140 venues capable of taking business tourism within Leicester and Leicestershire. And what we're doing is developing that up so that we can actually showcase us to try to develop that very important sector to help us moving forward. And we're currently recruiting to the tourism assistant post. Next slide, please, Simon. From an inward investment perspective, it started becoming a little bit more challenging towards the end of 2019, particularly around business confidence that really does steer whether or not a company will invest or not. And it's become obviously more and more important than ever that we are looking after our existing businesses and helping them to grow. And that links in nicely with the work that we're doing with foreign-owned companies that Salman Mansour leads on. One of the things that the key team particularly does well is we maintain a commercial site and premises database that people and businesses can search. But then what we do is we take people through it and help and add value to that information that we're already collecting in terms of how we can support them into and grow within our area. Just moving on, Simon. As part of our Inward Investment Toolkit, we've been redesigning our Inward Investment website and the new brochures in development. And I've got a meeting in the middle of the month. I think Simon's in it as well, with Nick Rushton, looking at how that's shaping up with a view to trying to get that launched quite imminently. We've been collating lots of new images, photographic images, and some video content across Leicester and Leicestershire of the best sites so that we can effectively try to better promote the area, and also working with some of those key businesses that have already invested, because we'd say the area is great, but actually businesses saying it is even more important. So we're doing that, and then also working alongside some of our business leaders, our ambassadors, to bounce off with them the work that we're doing to say, well, is this the right type of promotional literature that would actually work well to attract your business, as an example. So there's a lot of work going forward in relation to that at the moment. Simon? The next two slides are basically extracts from our sites map that was produced in March this year, just to give you a flavour for the sites that we are promoting. And I know at the last Scrutiny meeting we did have a paper copy of this, but obviously since lockdown we haven't really been able to do that. So what we're doing instead is promoting it via our website and through our LinkedIn pages. And what we will be doing is, once the new website's live, is we will actually be picking each of those individual sites and using them as a driver of traffic to the website that helps promote those sites coming forward. Next slide, the next one after that, Simon, please. As I said, LinkedIn's very, very important for us, and we are growing that base. And what we've very much focused on was focusing on businesses that, the intermediaries. So it's private property investors, developers, agents, planning agents, those people that are effectively advising people about their relocation decisions. So initially we targeted them in terms of our connections, and since then we've been growing it, linking in with local businesses as well, who basically are very keen to understand what's positive about the area, and that seems to be growing very well. I'm really pleased with the way that that's going. And the example that we've got there was one of the press releases about Lutterworth East, and we basically then just signpost that on, promote it, and try and encourage awareness of bigger schemes that are coming forward to build that confidence to attract further investment. Next slide, last slide, Simon. We work closely with the district councils, and Ollie leads on a group called the Inward Investment Group that we've established, and that works alongside district council leads, but also the Department for International Trade, partnership manager, just looking at how we can work better together. And as I said previously about the high potential opportunity, we've got these key sectors that we're trying to grow. And Department for International Trade has recently said that they are supporting, or going to be supporting us developing one around life sciences rehabilitation, because they feel that we've got a UK strength there that would be worthwhile showcasing internationally using their connections. And so hopefully that just gives you a sort of a quick summary of some of the key activity that the team is involved in and working on, and where we're going. Obviously, we've been building it very much reflective of COVID and responses, and working very closely with the business recovery cell. 2020 and beyond's going to be extremely hard, and I think we just need to work harder, better together, building on our private sector investors that are already in the city and the county. And that's the end of the presentation, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Very informative. So what I'm going to do now is ask members if they've got some questions. First of all, Simon, is there anything you want to add in terms of the links and relationship with your work area?
Nothing, Chair, nothing to add, just to apologise for the technology issues and to thank Sally for stepping in. But no, happy for any questions to be initially directed to Mark, I guess, and then Sally, Ollie and I can pick up anything in support.
Okay, then. Right. So at this point in time, I have got Dr. Einan and then Mrs. Page. So Terry first.
Thank you, Simon. One picky question, page 32, when you talk about on the investment page, how do you know that a job has been safeguarded? So what is the criteria? I mean, it's kind of difficult to measure a negative at the best of times. And then another question really is, who sits on the tourism advisory board? How do we decide who sits on that with us?
Who's going to take that, please?
Yeah. If I just start with the response in terms of jobs safeguarded, the way that we approach it is a job created, if, for example, jobs safeguarded would effectively pick up where a business was looking to relocate. We've been working with them to try to help them relocate, and we've managed to get them to stay within the local area. So they may have, for example, moved into Watermead Business Park as a relocation. So where they've said to us, well, we've got quite a wide area we're considering, we're saying, well, actually, we've got some options and some opportunities within Leicester and Leicestershire that we'd like you to consider. How can you build those in, then working with them to try to get them to stay within the area. In terms of the membership of the Tourism Advisory Board, I'm just going to ask Sally if you could respond on that one, please.
Yeah, that's fine. So the Tourism Advisory Board has been established for about 3 years. It tends to be kind of senior stakeholders from representing a range of sectors, including accommodation, sports, transport, the districts, indoor attractions and outdoor attractions. So we try to get a spread of representatives from all the districts and the city and a range of sectors, and these are mostly at kind of like CEO level. So it's chaired by Sharon Redrobe of Twycross Zoo. We have a representative from East Midlands Airport. We have Leicestershire and Rutland Sport. We have one of the larger hotels in the area. We have the National Forest Company CEO. We have John Richardson from Blaby District Council. He is the representative for the district councils. We have Richard III Visitor Centre. We have a representative from the city. We have representatives from the City Council and the County Council who fund the Place Marketing Organisation. We have Fiona Baker from the LEP. We have Great Central Railway, National Space Centre. We have Leicester College, who represents the skills agenda, and Everard's Brewery, who represents food and food and drink sector. So we try to get a range of representatives from different districts and from different sectors, and they're at a senior level so that they're able to provide us with a valuable steer on all the work we did. And as Mark said earlier, they helped steer us through the tourism growth plan. They also represent the sector on the business recovery cell that the LEP have, and feed all the sector information in through to the place strand of the business recovery cell.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Terry. So I've now got Alan Pearson, Dan Harrison and David Bill, but Rosita Page is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions, please. First of all, you're talking about the challenges ahead and how you are going to work to come out of the recovery. So in a way, this strategy is a kind of recovery plan. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what are the future ambitions? How are we going to pick it all up? And, well, the ambitions. Then my next question is, you've just talked about the advisory board. Now, the advisory board is a really well-constituted body. We've seen that you have got very comprehensive websites, signposting and video images. But I've been around for an awful long time, and if I wouldn't be sitting on a scrutiny commission, I wouldn't be aware of all of this going on. So I'm not actually trailing the computer. So how do you get the people out there who to go and look at the website, at the signposting, and how do you communicate all of the good stuff which has been done by the advisory board and yourselves back down to the general public, back down to grassroots levels? And my third question is, so to avoid confusion and promote interaction and whatever, so quite often I've heard people say this is very city-centred. So how do you cover off an even breakdown between the rurals, between the shires and the city? So 3 questions. Thank you.
Do you want to have a response to that, Mark?
Yeah, certainly. From a inward investment recovery perspective, one of the things that we are and have been doing is looking very much at those sectors that we think are the right sectors to grow and support, working alongside the LEP. So as I outlined in the presentation, we've done some work on the space industry. We've got some work that's going to come forward in relation to life sciences, where they're higher value jobs. And then we've got these key sectors that we feel that we've got a greater strength in or opportunity in around our offer. So really it's a case of working out how best to raise awareness of Leicester and Leicestershire from an investment perspective, but very much building in the voice of local business. As I said in my presentation, we would say Leicester and Leicestershire was a great place for investment, but the value of businesses doing that is more so. At the moment, particularly, we do rely largely on website and internet use and social media to drive traffic, because that is what everyone is using to find out and to search and to research. One of the things that we've been building on in the team from a recovery perspective is our data that helps support investors' decisions. We've got access to something called Power BI, which is a database that helps provide some more information about a place. And we use that when we're working with companies to better inform them about the opportunities that are available from an economic perspective. From the how do you get people to come to Leicester and Leicestershire, it is a big challenge. And that's part of the reason why we work very closely alongside the Tourism Advisory Board, so that when people do come, they don't just go to one place, they go to 2, 3 places and maybe stay the night as well. So by working closer together, when we do capture them, we make the most of that investment or that visit into the area. One of the strands that, or two of the strands that we're doing particularly that was part of the presentation was Uncover the Story and Business Tourism. Uncover the Story is very much geared towards leisure tourists, business tourism obviously for the business side. So we're using those as the 2 key strands that we are particularly putting time and effort into to raise awareness of the location. And there'll be marketing campaigns around both of those that will raise the profile of Leicester and Leicestershire under those 2 strands. From a city-county perspective, because I cut across city and county, I don't really see too much difference. I just see it as a place more generally. And obviously with Sally being in my team as a county council employee, she adds real value from that dimension across the whole of the patch. And I think that from a I think we've got room to improve in terms of raising awareness of attractions and destinations and our accommodation providers. But with these brands that cut across not location but a thematic, by using those thematic themes that are in the tourism growth plan, we're better able to ignore those boundaries to a certain extent and actually just direct visitors to the places that are right for them to fit their requirements. And that's part of the reason why we've got something that's called Fitcation that we're looking to introduce at the beginning of next year. And that's very much geared towards sports and outdoors activities, because it's very much geared towards those individuals that might be thinking about that. So it's less about city county, it's more about where the attractions are and the offer is. I don't know, Sally, is there anything you want to add to that at all?
No, I was just going to pick up on the point about reach and how we attract people from outside the area. So we've just appointed a new place marketing manager, and one of her priorities is developing a campaign to improve awareness of Uncover the Story. But also we are taking information to trade shows. So the slides that were presented on the Discover England Fund campaign that we've done. We've been working with West Midlands Growth Company and Shakespeare's England and other destination management organisations to pull together all our experiences, leisure tourism experiences, to promote at trade fairs. And I think that last year we went to 12 trade fairs as a consortium to promote the Midlands. So it's not just about sort of the local area, it's also about reaching a national audience through national trade fairs and working with the travel trade, trying to engage the travel trade, who are like wholesalers for the tourism offer, to try to spread our reach a bit further. And also with the business tourism, we're going to Olympia in October and Birmingham to try and promote our business tourism offer both nationally and internationally. It's a sort of hybrid trade show. So we are doing kind of, I suppose, managing reach in that way, as well as our other more traditional marketing campaigns.
Right, thank you very much. Alan Pearson. Can you hear me, Alan? I think you're on mute.
It's okay. I've just got bad network in Melton. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple of things quickly. Number one, what I don't see is what a lot of families and tourists is look at price cost comparisons. When families go somewhere, it's not just the attraction, it's how much it's going to cost, what is the value, etc. Have we got figures for that? So how we compare with other tourist destinations. Secondly, we talked about jobs, how we sort of increase the work side of it, the job side of it, but what type of jobs? I mean, the reality is, we're always trying to increase the skills and the quality of work. What we've got to be careful of is, the jobs come along that are poorly paid and are not secured on poor contracts. And the third question is the relationship with the districts. Could you describe who and how you work with all the other districts? Because each district, of course, has got its own attractions and concepts and ideas. So they're the three questions. Thank you.
Okay. Mark, you can.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. If I ask Sally to have a little think about the price comparison side of things, I don't know whether you're able to answer that one. And I guess the question back to Councillor Pearson is relationships with districts. Are you thinking tourism side or investment side or both? Is it economic connections? That's what I was trying to understand.
Sorry again. Yeah, I guess it's both. I mean, the tourism and economically, yeah. From a, the inward investment is very important for us, of course. I mean, you've mentioned that and how it works with the districts, but also tourism. Yeah, Melton, we are a market town, as some other towns are in Leicestershire. How do we work together? How do we maximise that potential? And how do we work closely with the districts and their knowledge, etc. What I do find sometimes, what we don't want is conflict, where locally we're marketing something with a company or the local district, and the centralised marketing may be conflict or difference. How do we manage that?
I don't know if they want me to step in, Mark, with a couple of answers.
Yes, I didn't hear the end of Councillor Pearson's statement, but yeah, if you want to, Sally.
Okay, if you want me to pick up on perhaps working with the districts particularly, and how we make sure that we complement the work we do, and we never want to dictate. So obviously the tourism growth plan is a framework that the districts have signed up to. They're all well aware of it, and it's my job really to liaise with the tourism partnerships, which are generally led by the districts, but they also involve all the tourism businesses in their area. So and also with the public sector officers. So if you're giving Melton as an example, I sit on the Melton Place Board. So I'm there as a sort of strategic tourism representative, so that I hear what Melton is doing, and I can make sure that I'm aware of what it is, so that it complements the works we're doing at a strategic level. the Tourism Advisory Board is also a way of engaging with the districts, and I work with the tourism lead officers. We've actually, as part of the tourism recovery framework, set up a tourism lead officers group, and we've been meeting. It's chaired by John Richardson of Blaby District Council, and we meet about every 2 months, and we talk all things tourism, not just recovery, but we've been talking about Uncover the Story as well. And I work very closely with the lead tourism officers to develop their stories. I don't go into the districts and work independently. I work through the tourism lead officers in the public sector and the tourism partnerships, which are connections with the businesses. So there is a really, really strong network. And actually, when we launched the tourism growth plan, it was something that Visit Britain picked up on, about how well networked we are and how we all work in a very complementary way. Just picking up on the price point issue, I think that Leicester and Leicestershire are very offer really good value for money, and it's particularly a point with the business tourism offer that we have. We commissioned a business tourism strategy prior to setting up the business tourism service, and through that research we found out that we offer incredible value for money, and it was one of our unique selling points for the area, and it was something that the consultant that we were working with had picked up on particularly. And it's, I mean, I'll give an example of Hothorpe Venues in Lutterworth, that they went to the meeting show last year. I met them there, and people were amazed at the quality of that venue for the price that they were offering it. So I think we offer extremely good value for money, particularly on the business tourism sector, which is a real advantage when setting up that service and launching it nationally. So I hope those have answered a couple of the questions.
Okay.
Can I just respond? No, that sounds great. Are we getting that message, Sally? Are we telling people about it? Because I don't see that. I see some good marketing, but are we pushing the value for money? Are we pushing, hey, we come to Leicestershire instead of Warwickshire because hey, it's just as good and it's cheaper. You get better value for money. Can we do that?
I'd have to take that one away and give that some thought, and it's perhaps something I can discuss with the tourism lead officers. What we're trying to do, I suppose, initially is distinguish the place. The marketplace for leisure tourism is just so competitive that we've just been trying to raise our profile and prepare a kind of distinctive offer. But certainly, the value for money, we're definitely pushing it with the business tourism, but I can certainly take that back to district tourism officers and see how that can perhaps be incorporated more as a message.
Okay, Oliver, had you got something you wanted to add before I take the next question?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to sort of pick up on the point about inward investment and how we work with the districts. Just one example, again, this kind of builds on the recovery side of things as well, that we, because I work quite heavily on some of the key sector work, and so again, we've been looking at those sectors that have the potential to grow moving forwards and those that are resilient based upon the findings following COVID. So things like your healthcare, your food manufacturing, life sciences, stuff like that. So they're the ones that we want to drive forward. So, for instance, one of the things we've been working with the districts on is at the food manufacturing zone over at Melton. So I've been working very closely with colleagues in the Economic Development Service over there to build the offer. And so when we're putting together propositions for either going to DIT or going to other targeted companies that we're looking at, it is actually focusing on what the local offer is. So what effectively are our USPs and our unique assets locally. So again, it's building on those. So we add that in. So we're getting key messages, key information, and actually showcasing the main assets. So most of those assets, we get the districts to work with us directly to feed in information, so they feel part and parcel of that. So we then go to businesses proactively, targeting specific businesses based on the sector profiling. When we potentially have a client that we want to bring in. We bring the districts on board with us, and we've done that numerous times where we've had joint visits, joint meetings with district colleagues, either through economic development or through planning, ourselves as that facilitator, that intermediary with the developers, etc. So it's been a multifaceted approach when it comes to districts. So, and then as kind of a working group level as well, every sort of around 3 months or so, we have an inward investment group meeting where DIT are brought in with the district leads, district inward investment leads, chaired by myself, and effectively it's a information sharing. So we're sharing key messages, we're gathering information, what's hot, what's not within the local area specifically, and where DIT can also add value. So quite a lot of it where we've fed information from DIT into the districts. They've had presentations on what DIT can offer, and some of the information that the district colleagues have been able to take away has been absolutely fantastic for them. So that's the number of things, just a few examples of how we've worked on a specific operational level with district colleagues.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Dan Harrison.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Really, I would say to you, show me the money. 1.9 billion. There's no segmentation of it. I come from a marketing background. The document and your presentation is excellent. I want to know where that 1.9 billion is. Is it in the city? Is it in the districts? How is the portion? We need a breakdown. We need to understand this is core marketing, the segmentation. This is really what drives the whole thing. This is a good document to show members of the public. It's fantastic presentation, and the team have really done well. So I compliment you all, and particularly Mark with all his difficulties in the presentation. But I need to know, this is scrutiny. I need to know where that money's come from, which districts are showing what values. We can improve our district presentation if we know what we're doing. We don't know whether we, out of 1.9 billion, are the districts getting a couple 100,000? Can we improve on that? This isn't about tribalism. This is pure marketing. Where is it? Where are we not so good? How can we beef those numbers up? And on this presentation, without that detail, how do we know? How can I scrutinise this other than say, yeah, it's brilliant, like what you're doing. Now let's talk business. Where is the money? How does this number appear? And what districts? What's the segmentation of it? The thing also is that by doing that and showing the values in the districts, it would give a greater incentive to the districts. We should be encouraging the districts to provide their 10 best attractions or features, and so we're embodying everybody, and we can then balance and monitor it, and we can understand the values of what we've got. We've had monetary value, but the value of being able to open up our assets better for the public to look at. Finally, I was reading a report about the next 20 years. There's going to be 3/4 of the growth of the new population is going to be 65 plus. So in marketing strategy, we should be looking at this. Where is the market growing? How big is everything in the market? What is the market size? We talk of 700 and so many 100,000. What have we got, 1 million plus? What is the segmentation? What's the breakdown? Are we featuring this? How are we doing it? I know you're doing lots of business work as well, but how can I truthfully scrutinise this properly if I don't know where that 1.9 billion is? Thank you, Simon.
Okay, who wants to have a go at that? Are you going to respond to that, Mark?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much for those comments, Councillor Harrison. I agree with you completely in terms of the 1.9 billion and what that really means. I think the issue and challenge in relation to that is that is from a model that's being developed through something called the STEAM data. And what that does is it looks at the use of car parks, the take-up in attractions, the bed spaces within hotels. It's a combination of sources that are put together by this company that produced the STEAM data, that is then able for us, or we then use to effectively benchmark it year on year, and also understand the travel of direction across those years. I'll ask Sally in a minute to just give a bit more detail in relation to how that works in practice, because she works very closely with the company that produced the data for us. But in terms of the population growth in certainly the 65 plus category, when we developed the tourism growth plan that has been considered, as we said previously, by Scrutiny, it did look very much at market segmentation in terms of visitors and which visitors are most likely to consider Leicester and Leicestershire as a potential visitation. And that's why within the tourism growth plan itself, we've built up these strands that try to focus on it. So it's less about the population growth within Leicester and Leicestershire, more about the opportunity to capture visitors that might be considering Leicester as a destination. I'm just going to ask Sally to give a little bit more detail about the STEAM data, just to reassure members about how and what we use that for.
Could I, Mr. Chairman, just go back to Mark? I understand that the research and how you're formulating this, but can I have assurances next time you present, we will have the financials, so we'll know what the district's values are, and they can look at themselves and we can understand better. Because all we're doing is scrutinising something that a company's research view, which is brilliant, that's all part of it. Gathering this information, intelligence is vital. But we need to know. I don't want to sit in 12 months' time and have another one and say we're 2.3 billion and whatever the number is. I want to know where that number comes from and how it relates to the whole of the county and all the districts and the city. It's the whole package.
So is it collected at that level, Mark, or not? Is it available?
That's why I'm asking Sally just to comment in terms of how we collect that data and what we do with it. It'll give Councillor Harrison more information in relation to that.
Okay.
Okay, I'll just mention about how the model works. There's a lot of national data that goes in, but then it's moderated by a lot of local data. So each of the districts provides us with car parking data, with retail footfall in market towns. We also get footfall from Foss Park, from High Cross shopping centres. We get information from indoor and outdoor visitor attractions. So there's a lot of local data that influences the STEAM reports. The data can, because we collect data from the districts, we can actually break those reports down into district areas, and each of the districts commissions their own reports. So we do it usually because they're relatively expensive. The districts tend to do it on a rolling programme every 3 years, and also they might not value data reports every year, so they kind of do it on a rolling programme every 3 years. So this year, 2 districts, I think it was North West Leicestershire and Blaby, commissioned STEAM reports for their area. So we don't always have STEAM reports for each district every year, but we do. They're usually kind of 1 or maybe 2 years out of date. And because of the situation with the pandemic, all of the districts have wanted to commission reports this year because they want a benchmark for measuring the impact on the economy next year, and they'll all want impact reports for 2020 as well to see what the impact has been. So this time next year, we would be able to bring back STEAM reports at a district level, which would be able to demonstrate, that the district breakdown and the kind of economic value of tourism, the number of jobs employed, and the number of visitors in each area. And that's and also we get a lot of more anecdotal, more live data, because obviously the problem with STEAM is that it's almost a year out of date when we get the data. So we actually do a lot of work with tourism partnerships to collect live data, and with the tourism advisory board. So when I report back to Visit Britain every 2 weeks on what's happening in our destination, and I gather all that live data from the district tourism partnerships. So it is something that we can do. We can do more of a district level report next time, and I can certainly collate that information. It is possible to do that. And things like the We're Good to Go, we got all that data together. We've broken it all down by district so that the district tourism officers can identify which businesses have got the quality mark, where they need to do more intervention work, where there might be businesses that might need the support. And we've mapped it geographically, and we've mapped it by sector as well, so that more proactive work can be done as interventions in supporting tourism businesses to get that quality mark, which is so important in our standards-led recovery approach. So it is definitely possible to break all that down into district level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's the answer you're looking for, Dan. We do need to move on now. So I've next got David Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a good report, and it's been a very interesting discussion. But my concern is, of course, that we are this report made sense in the beginning of the year, but then we were hit with the pandemic. And the reputation of Leicester has been absolutely shot to pieces, hasn't it? The message that the government was continually giving out was Leicester has to shut down and all the rest of it. And this news went all the way across the country. Whether it went beyond, I don't know, but the sort of information we were getting, the sort of news we were picking up is, well, at least we're not as bad as Leicester. I don't know how. I honestly do not know how you address this, but I don't see how we can actually produce reports, glossy photographs, which talk about, for example, the National Forest, and with the emblem Leicester in the corner, because Leicester, I wouldn't have thought Leicester is a place that people are now wanting to visit, either from this country or abroad. Can I just raise a specific point, additional point? Looking at what we said last time, and I was very keen on this. This is at the bottom of page 25. I was concerned that we're talking about the Richard III industry, what it's effectively turned into, I suppose. And we thought that the battlefield, or the area where he was actually killed, where the battle actually took place, should have a higher profile. But that seems to have been rejected by the tourist team on the next page, which talks about the Richard III Visitor Centre being the main attraction. Now, I've got no idea whether the visitor centre is now open, and I don't know whether the cathedral, where the tomb is actually open. But I very much doubt whether we're now getting the visitors there in anywhere like the same numbers that we were, say, this time last year. And so my specific question is, are we really working alongside the Stratford-on-Avon and the Stratford-on-Avon people to build up the Shakespeare connection? Because I think that's the only way we're going to rebuild the tourist industry in, well, let's put it anyway. That is one way in which the tourist industry can be rebuilt. So I'm sorry I'm being a bit negative, but all I'm saying is that the reputation of Leicester has been really taken such a hammering. Do we really have the answers to overcome that problem?
Okay, so specifically then, is there a kind of bounce back strategy being put in place in the light of the issues that Mr. Bills indicated? And that the other issue had occurred to me as well about Richard III, because it wasn't in the Uncover the Story. It just seems to be absolutely significant to how we might approach recovery.
Chair, can I just respond initially to Mr. Bill's question, and then Mark can perhaps come in?
Yeah.
There is, of course, an economic recovery cell, which is chaired by the LEP. So the wider economic recovery activity, of which place marketing, tourism, business tourism plays an important part, is looked at that sort of strategic level. And there's a piece of work been commissioned, the board signed off last month to build a economic recovery strategy. And I think place marketing will play a really important part in the activity that's identified within that strategy. And that's something that will come out towards the end of November. That, I think, is the timetable that the LEP are working to. The other point probably worth bearing in mind is the appointment now to a place marketing manager that Mark referred to earlier. So again, her work, I think, will focus initially, I would have thought, very much on the point that Mr. Bill makes, and how do we recover both Leicester and Leicestershire from the issues of the local lockdown. And then the final point I'd make is that the management team with Tom Purnell and Mike Dazelle are meeting regularly and picking up that point. Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to that, Mark? Or
I think Simon summarised the position well in terms of obviously it's a very challenging time, and we, as everywhere, are experiencing less visitors and less investors at this point in time. The good news from a certain perspective is that actually we've got a plan of what we're actually looking to do to drive that upwards. So there is a positive in relation to the activities that we're progressing, but it is a real challenge, and it's very much, as I said in my presentation, about working well together to strengthen and amplify the messages that we're coming forward with. There is a group that my team have established called it's an internal sort of one that's called the Strategic Marketing Group. And that is basically the city and the council working with the 3 universities, with the Federation of Small Business, the Chamber of Commerce, the LEP, and a number of other key players to say, well, actually, we need to make sure that the messages that are going out from those largely public sector organisations are joined up, so that effectively we are amplifying what we want to say about the area more so and better, utilising those shared resources. So there is work that's coming forward in relation to that, and the City Council is very aware of that challenge and how we can try to actually bring something forward that will raise the profile of the place in the right ways.
Okay, who's going to pick up the point about Richard III and links with Stratford?
Yeah,
I can come in on that one. Some of the slides showed some work that we've been doing with the West Midlands Growth Company and Shakespeare's England. So that's obviously that covers Stratford, to work together in a complementary way to jointly promote our visitor experiences. So I'm part of a consortium, and I work very closely with the DMO that manages Stratford and Shakespeare's England. So we are, I mean, it was, I remember it being specifically mentioned, and we have actually picked up on that and are now working with other destination management organisations in the wider West Midlands, including West Midlands Growth Company. So that those slides of the experiences that Mark showed, that's part of the work that we've been doing with Shakespeare's England. On the Richard III story, that Richard III story is integral to the Uncover the Story. When we talk about the King Richard III story, we always include the 3 attractions, which is the cathedral, the visitor centre, and Bosworth Battlefield. And we did make a point in the tourism growth plan of always talking about the 3 together, because they tell a very complementary story about Richard III. So we only had limited time, so we couldn't put all of the stories in there. But we have developed an Uncover the Story for Bosworth Battlefield, as we have done with the cathedral and Richard III Visitor Centre. So it is still very much something we are promoting and developing and using it to profile the area. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you very much. So lastly, then I've got Tom Barclay.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of my questions have already been asked, but I think there is a very positive nature to the presentation. I know we're looking at last year, but the world has changed dramatically. And as far as I can see, we're doing pretty much everything we can. Confidence is key. The fact that people aren't using transport to come anywhere near Leicestershire is going to be very difficult. There are many challenges to overcome. But some of the key businesses within the tourism industry, are they aware? I mean, they're going to be struggling to survive. Is there any way we can make them aware of the funds, the COVID-19 recovery funds, or areas where they can get assistance? Because a lot of them will have furloughed staff and then be restarting again now. So specifically, that's my question. Can we help them? Because I see as survival over the next 3 months as being key. And if we could get the same figures of 35.3 million visitors to Leicester and Leicestershire next year, I think it would be more than an achievement. I think it would be absolutely fantastic. I think it's virtually impossible. But I think survival and growth going forward. Is there anything we can do to help these businesses in the tourism industry?
You want me to take that, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, just to respond to Councillor Barclay, I mean, Sally has been really heavily supporting on that agenda, because it's been so key for us, particularly as she's very, very close to a lot of those bigger attractions, and has put in place lots of different ways to support them, aligned to the work of the LEP and a whole package of support. But if Sally could just outline what it is specifically been working on, and some of the examples, Sally, because it's really taken me back in terms of the amount of time and effort that you put into making sure this comes forward.
And Chair, can I just add before Sally responds? Of course, the County Council launched the Business Recovery Grant Fund last month. That's £750,000 of funding made available specifically for the purpose that Mr. Barclay raises. So it's targeting tourist businesses and other businesses as well. And we are starting to get money as quickly as we can through to those businesses, and primarily to focus on those that are struggling to survive, and not surviving would result in unemployment to individuals. So it's about protecting those in employment in those particular businesses. So it's a new grant that I think has been very well received. There's been hundreds of applications involved coming to the County Council for us to consider, and Sally is on the grant panel that assesses those. But Sally may be able to add more to that answer.
Yeah, so obviously when the pandemic started, my priority was really supporting the businesses to find out about all the recoveries, the business support measures that were available. So not only financial, but also in terms of advice. So signposting them to the Growth Hub business advisors. There was a business support website that Visit Britain immediately set up, so that it was sector specific, because I think a lot of the problems that the businesses had, there was a lot of information coming out very quickly. They didn't know where to get sector specific information all in one place. So this is what we were trying to do, is act as the sort of conduit between all the kind of the government guidance that was coming out, the government grant schemes, and then sort of filter it so that they were getting sector specific information. So I was sending out lots and lots of emails to tourism partnerships, to tourism lead officers in the districts, to individual businesses themselves, about all the guidance that was coming out initially, and then all the financial support that was coming out. Also, it was a two-way thing. I was feeding back information about some of the challenges our businesses were having and feeding it back to DCMS and Visit Britain. And we invited DCMS to come to the Tourism Advisory Board to meet sort of sector leaders. And as I say, I report every 2 weeks to Visit Britain to talk about the challenges that we're having to help shape the policy, so that we make sure that we get the right sort of support here in Leicestershire, tailored to our own particular needs. So there was an awful lot of information that went out through emails. We also arranged through the Business Growth Hub a number of webinars. So when the tourism and hospitality guidance came out, we organised a webinar we had 97 businesses sign up for that to find out about the government guidance. So they were well supported with finding out the information. Then when the We're Good to Go industry standard was launched, we had Visit Britain who explained that. We had another 60 businesses that signed up for that webinar. So as well as all the emails that we've been sending out, we've been working with the district tourism partnerships and with the Growth Hub to really get that information out there. And now we're kind of picking up, as Simon said, with the business recovery grants that have, and I'm the sort of tourism specialist that sits on the tourism panel to make sure that those businesses are fairly assessed.
Okay.
Thank you, Sally. That sounds excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've given this a very thorough look over, and I'd like to thank the three officers who come and presented to us this morning. I believe this will become a sort of annual event if you're happy to come back and update us on how things are going. I think next year will be crucial in terms of how well we've managed to recover and move forward and address some of the issues that have been raised today. But I would like to thank you again for coming this morning and giving us time and your expertise to present. On the whole, I think it's a good story, and we've just got to hope that we do make that recovery and bounce back in the way that has been identified this morning. So thank you very much for joining us. I'd now like to move on to agenda item 11, which is the growth unit. Simon Lawrence, head of growth unit and major programs, is going to present this item. I understand there are some slides, Simon. Are you going to able to load those up?
Yes, that's my intention, Chair, and hopefully I'll be able to do that straight away. Joe, are you able to see if you can load them as well? Again,
So while Simon's doing that, just to remind members that we did discuss the formation of the growth unit, and members wanted further information about the operation of the growth unit, who's involved in it, what the role is, and this report is attempting to address those issues and questions that members have asked for.
That's absolutely correct. Can you see the slides that I've just put up or not?
Yeah.
What I can see at the moment is just you. Oh, that's back now.
Okay. So yes, there's a dozen or so slides that hopefully reflect the content of the paper that was issued last week. And exactly as you say, Chair, the purpose of the report is really to update the Commission on the establishment of the growth unit and to set out the current activity and the focus, and also to provide some specific examples of the work that the unit's doing. So the structure really is just to focus on the vision and the focus, set out its responsibilities, and to provide some of those examples. I think it's probably worth saying that the purpose is really to look at the growth unit and not to dive into the detail around some of the subjects that I'll cover, because I will refer to broadband, COVID-19 recovery, Lutterworth East and other specific projects that we're involved in. So in terms of the vision, and this was established by the Cabinet last May when funding was put forward to it, was really to oversee the effective delivery of growth, managing the financial risk to the County Council, achieving the Council's strategic and departmental outcomes in a way that protects and enhances communities in Leicestershire. Apologies to reading to you, but I think it's important for that focus and that vision to be clear in members' minds. That's really what the unit was set up to do. And the context, of course, is not lost on members and has been referred to in the earlier discussion. There is significant population growth identified for Leicester and Leicestershire over the next 25 years and beyond, and that is growing. That creates a pressure in the housing market and on employment and skills. But of course, with housing and those growth issues comes a requirement for significant infrastructure. And whilst the County Council supports that growth, it needs, though, to find a way of supporting the delivery of that infrastructure in a way that doesn't create financial risk and challenges to the county council. So that's really the main focus and raison d'etre for the unit, and much of the work that we get involved with is based around that vision. So the next slide just summarises the focus, and I think this reflects what the Cabinet asked us to do and the vision statement that I've just shared. So it's about identifying and managing the risks to the county council. It's about coordinating the county council's input to the strategic growth plan and local plans. So again, it's about working collaboratively with a whole range of stakeholders, and I'll come on to that later, to make sure that the county council's position is known and is clear and is a deliverable position to take. Point 3 makes the point around internal departmental input. There is significant contributions from each of the departments from the county council in terms of supporting growth, whether that's highways, whether that's education, but also touches on issues around adult social care, children's social care, public health. So it's really important that we don't lose sight of the wider infrastructure needs for development. Working closely with external stakeholders, working closely with districts around local plans, working closely with the members advisory group that Mr. Richardson referred to earlier, and the strategic planning group, apologies for the acronyms, that supports the MAG. And just 2 or 3 other small points on there, which we'll come on to later. The issue around Section 106 is an important issue clearly for the delivery and financing of infrastructure. So the growth unit's heavily involved in specific discussions with districts around Section 106, but more general discussions around how that might work. And linked to that, again referred to earlier, is the new planning white paper. So I've done a lot of work over the last few weeks with Nick Thomas, and I think a paper's coming to the Commission at the next meeting looking at the implications of the white paper. Points 8 and 9 just make reference to 2 specific issues around broadband and around the Development Corporation, which I will touch on later. So in terms of the growth unit structure and responsibilities, the structure shows on the right a fairly broad range of responsibilities that in fact exceeds the expectation of Cabinet initially last year. So there's a core of growth managers and a growth team that sits within the unit. I'm now responsible for the economic growth team and also for the broadband team as well, because of the complementary nature of the responsibilities. So the unit is larger than perhaps was anticipated, but I think as a result, it adds more value to the work that it does. And on the right-hand side, I've shown its responsibilities in relation to the economic recovery, as well as the 2 of the 5 outcomes within the strategic plan around affordable and quality homes and strong economy outcomes. So the colleagues within the growth unit are driving forward those particular responsibilities. This plan shows something I'll pick up in a moment, but there are 9 priority growth areas that I've identified for the growth unit, specifically around that vision, around supporting the effective delivery of growth. And I'll touch on some of these, but in the list you could perhaps you'll be familiar with anyway, but from 1 to 9, 1 is Lutterworth, 2nd is Melton and the work around the growth issues there. 3 is the North East Leicester SUE, 4 is broadband, 5 is Garendon Park, 6 is into Blaby and Junction 20A Western Pastures, and 7 M69 Junction 2 Sapcote. 8 is the major road network through Colville, and 9, the darker circles, is the Development Corporation proposals that stretches into Nottinghamshire, which is something that the unit is leading on behalf of the County Council. So I'll not dwell on this list too much, Chair, but this sets and the second slide just identify, and they were set out in the report, a number of things that is active within the growth unit's activity. So we are implementing a new business partner approach around the issue of growth. So that means growth managers and colleagues working directly with departments so we understand their needs and their input to the growth agenda. So when engaging with external stakeholders, and particularly districts, the growth unit can speak with one voice for the county council, and that's something that districts have welcomed. And we can also coordinate and share intelligence with our departments around activity that's happening around particular sites as they go through their various phases. Second then relates to external engagement with key stakeholders, and that list would be long, but of course districts are key in their local planning authority responsibilities, but also important local players such as the university, developers, the clinical commissioning groups, Homes England, Midlands Engine, the enterprise partnership, etc. So there are some really important relationships that the growth unit is quickly developing, and I think is a role that those stakeholders are appreciating in the way that we're taking that forward. We manage a register of key sites and sustainable urban extensions in the county, aligned to district local plan activity. So we're getting a better forward vision of what's happening and what's coming into the county council in terms of funding challenges or issues to resolve. Section 106 is always an important issue. On the health sector, we've done some good work with the new clinical commissioning group chief executive Andy Williams, and I know Mrs Page has had a number of meetings with Andy as well. He's keen to develop a new approach within the county around a longer term plan for health infrastructure to support the level of growth that's coming down the line, and that's something that I think was missing from the health sector in the past. So they want to work with us more closely around the strategic growth plan, but also to work more closely through the growth unit on specific sites and opportunities within the county. So they're seen almost alongside other infrastructure elements that the county council will be interested in, whether that's highways or schools, the need to ensure that developments properly accommodate the needs of the health family is key, and the growth unit I think can play a really important part in getting that off the ground. Issues around climate emergency again is something is really important. We have a clean growth officer role within the growth unit to make sure that as growth develops and developments come forward, we ensure that the policy and the position around climate emergency is reflected in decisions that the county council needs to take. If I just go to the next slide, and I can pick up points in questions if members have them, of course. Engagement with the City Council and with Melton. So I'll not jump off from Melton. The growth unit has been partially involved in some of the activity in relation to the master planning and issues of delivery in Melton. And had it been established earlier in the process, I think perhaps would have taken a more significant role. Working with the city, though, is a really interesting area because there are a number of cross-border issues that impact developments that are proposed within the county, whether that's school place planning or issues in relation to highway network management. And the growth unit can help smooth the issues around those sorts of challenges that are coming forward, and to do that in a much more coordinated way than perhaps we've done so in the past. On Development Corporation and Blaby, there are some slides in a moment that will pick up on those. And just quickly on the last 2 or 3 points, just highlight activity now with North West Leicestershire District Council, a number of discussions with the Chief Executive and with her leader around developing a collaboration approach between the growth unit and the county council and the district council, which is broadly summarised as the districts have clearly the responsibility for place shaping through their local plan responsibilities, but the county council has a responsibility to deliver the infrastructure required to make that happen. And it's really important that as soon as possible within the life cycle of a local plan and beyond, that engagement happens and there's a collaboration and a clear understanding around responsibilities between those two issues. And that's shaping up well with Northwest, similarly with Blaby, and I'll come on to that in a moment, but also with a couple of the other districts as well. So again, that's how the growth unit wants to work, to represent the county council in those sorts of discussions, and that's shaping up nicely. So the last 3 or 4 slides just pick up some specific case studies that are included within the report. First of which is the Midlands Engine Development Corporation. So it is probably justified as an agenda item in its own right for the Scrutiny Commission at some point in the future. But the purpose for this here is just to highlight the role that the growth unit is playing. So there are numerous meetings on a weekly, almost daily basis on all sorts of aspects around the Development Corporation, and the growth unit is representing the county in those meetings, ensuring that the county council's interest is being properly served in being part of that consortia. Of course, the 3 sites that are shown on that plan, 2 of which are in Nottinghamshire, at Towton and at Ratcliffe on Saw Power Station, but the 3rd critically is at the airport. So we need to make sure that the investment required and the benefits that accrued are what the county council would want. So there's a lot of work happening on that at the moment, and one of the growth managers is dedicated to doing that work, and certainly has been over the last few months. Lutterworth East Strategic Development Area, you'll be familiar with that as a scheme, and the growth unit has played an integral role alongside Strategic Property Services to make that happen. Property Services bring a unique and critical perspective to this scheme, and that they are keen to see the development come forward and to make profit and to do the right thing for the scheme. What the growth unit does in collaboration with Property Services is provide that wraparound corporate approach and that engagement with members. And again, Mrs. Page and others were integral to developing some fairly ambitious exemplar scheme project objectives for this, and again that's an example of where the growth unit plays a part. It's also now responsible for looking at, again with strategic property, about development delivery options, whether that's through joint venture partnerships as well as other opportunities, and that's in the light of the unsuccessful HIF bid that went forward, but also the impact that COVID will have on that delivery of that scheme. So again, a lot of work has gone into that from the growth unit over the last 12-18 months. Working with Charnwood, just use this really as an example. There's 3 big sites, all at various different stages within Charnwood, and the growth unit's now acting as that single point of contact for Charnwood colleagues. So whether that's around the local plan or the specifics of certain sites, and we sit on the growth advisory group that's chaired by Charnwood Borough Council, and that's proving to be a really useful relationship as those sites develop. And then I think the last slide is really just picking up the point around working with Blaby. So that was one of the first ones we picked up, given the stages that the 2 big sites within Blaby have reached, and in conversation with Jane Toman and senior officers, really keen to develop that collaboration and that joined up approach around place shaping and infrastructure delivery, and making sure that the county council's responsibility for infrastructure isn't just focused around highway infrastructure delivery. It's much broader than that. So there's lots of meetings with the growth unit and Blaby colleagues to make sure that what's required to support their ambition for the place is delivered in a safe way through the work that the growth unit does. That was just the end of the presentation, Chair. I hope that's been of some use, and happy, of course, to take any questions that members may have.
Yeah, okay, that's really comprehensive. Thank you very much. I think that we have a better understanding from your presentation on what work's actually being done and how you're resourced to do that. Right, a number of people have got some questions. I'm going to start with Terry Richardson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Simon. I think you alluded to the elephant in the room right at the start of your presentation, which is the new planning white paper, which effectively, for those that have read it, will do a couple of things. It will shoot massive holes in the house numbers that got to be provided, and therefore have a huge knock-on impact on potential for infrastructure that will be required. It also seems to put the obligation on councils to borrow the money for infrastructure spending. So I just wondered what early stage conversations you've had with the finance team about what the borrowing ability of the council might be to support those infrastructure issues, particularly in the light of Section 106 going and be likely to be replaced by a different type of levy. Which is the one that can be borrowed against. I appreciate you said you'd be coming back with a further paper, but I mean, it would strike me that in some ways this one is now going to be history, not through anything you've done, but because of a white paper issued by central government, which I think all of us are fairly fearful of. A couple of other questions there as well. You mentioned engagement with the health sector. And one of the things that's always worried me is my understanding from reading everything I can find is that the NHS have a requirement to build specialist housing each year. They've not built a single house in the last 10 years. And I just wondered if your conversations have centred around what they're spending that money on, and should they not be inserting that into some of the larger schemes for perhaps dementia-friendly properties and stuff of that nature. Also, in the light of funding difficulties, I appreciate the desire to have a high design element, and I think we'd all welcome that. I don't think there's anyone on this call that wouldn't want that. But is that likely to be able to be done now in the light of the current financial envelope? So in the case of the first one you've got there coming on board, Lutterworth East, what design elements are you building in which don't exist within the current requirement for developers to have to put in place, but we're going to put down as our must-haves, and how's it going to be paid for? And bearing in mind there's now going to have to be a director of design at every planning authority from the white paper as well. I think that strikes me as somewhat strange, with no indication from central government how that's going to be paid for. So sorry, there's a large list there, but I suppose my final question would be as well is that you mentioned about the size of the team now being greater. So is the team being delivered within the £500,000 envelope voted for by council? And secondly, one of the things we did ask last time was what specific achievements have the team actually done? So, if you had to name a couple of things, what has been done by this team that wouldn't have got done had the team not existed?
Okay, before you start, can I just remind members, don't want to stifle debate, but when we structured this meeting and put in the additional meeting on the 14th, we knew that this planning white paper was going to be very, very hot, topical, and there is no way we can do that justice today with the other items that we've got to get through on the agenda. So that's why we put it on the 14th as a standalone item. I'm expecting it to take at least 2 hours, because of the kind of issues that Terry is raising, and I'm sure we all share. And you mentioned fearful. Yes, I think there is a lot of concern about the future of planning and how it's going to work should this become law in its present guise. So there might be a couple of things you want to address or are able to address now, Simon, but on the whole, we want to have this discussion on the 14th about this planning white paper, and we want to include in that what impact it is going to have on your work and the role and some of the things you've highlighted this morning. So just bear in mind, this isn't the end of it, that we are having a specific agenda item on this in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. No, thank you, Chair. That's helpful. And thank you, Mr. Richardson, for your questions. I'm not an absolute expert on the white paper, and again that will come forward in a couple of weeks. There are lots of interesting ideas. It's a radical reform of the planning process, of course, but again, not ducking the questions, but the devil will be in the detail around a lot of those things. So how developers make contributions, how the new levy works, how quickly that comes in to replace Section 106. And of course, it is only a white paper at this stage. It's subject to that consultation exercise. So there are some major challenges there. I was going to make reference to the Director of Design, or whatever the precise title is, and around your point around high quality delivery. And I think that's something that will become an important element in all delivery coming forward under the new white paper. So in some ways, you could argue that the exemplar approach at Lutterworth was leading the right, reading the right line. The affordability and the viability will be crucial in delivering those sorts of things. And we were a long way down the route of identifying that was something that we could still afford. I mean, it's, again, Lutterworth, using that as an example, was 40% affordable housing. So again, another ambition that the members were keen to maintain and support. In terms of discussions with the NHS, they are at an early stage, and we haven't yet talked about their responsibilities specifically around delivery housing, but we have talked around the overlap between an ageing population and responsibilities that sit between health and our adult social care and our public health responsibilities, to see whether there is an alignment that we can define within good design and how we deliver those schemes in a much more coordinated way. So that's both site specific, but also a more strategic joined up approach between both health sector and local government. The last point was around successes, and I'll just pick out 3 or 4 without wanting to repeat. One would be around the Development Corporation. That's a massive opportunity for the County Council and the county. And the growth unit and the growth manager involved in that now have been able to articulate the detail and the strengths and weaknesses of the approach that's being taken forward. So I think that's proved to be really helpful. Supporting John Bennett, who's coming on later, I think around Lutterworth has been, I think, a really valuable contribution, ensuring that the members and the full corporate approach to that scheme has been properly identified. And I think the growth unit has played a really important role in that. And 2 really quick ones. Hopefully this gets to the heart of the purpose of the paper, Chair. One is around speaking with a single voice across all the departments, because they have in the past historically engaged with districts on a department by department basis. So if you particularly around children's and adults, children's and school place planning and school requirements and highways haven't been joined up as well as they are now. So I think that's a real success in terms of that internal activity. And the discussions that we're now having with districts around that collaboration approach, I think will prove to be really valuable over the next few years, whatever happens with the white paper, whatever amendments and changes to statute arise from that white paper. I still think that the approach that the growth unit's putting forward in terms of that internal coordination and that engagement with our external partners and districts is going to be a real success.
Okay, so Terry, you haven't got the answers to everything you've raised there, but taking board my further comments, I mean, you know, the issues you've raised are absolutely topical and need to be addressed.
Oh, that's perfectly fine, Simon.
Sorry?
That's perfectly fine. I was just trying to get an early stage view.
I don't
Simon.
blame you at all.
Nothing detailed.
We'll be having a range of officers, of other officers, as well as Simon on the 14th on some of those technical issues that you've raised. Okay, can we make a note now to make sure we got Nick Thomas, because I think he will be, you mentioned he's producing the council's response, Simon.
He'll be central to that discussion on the 14th, but okay. Yeah, and I'll be in attendance as well.
Thank you. Okay, right, I've got David Bill next.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, could I ask whether we could be sent the slides that we've just been shown? They don't appear in the report, and there's some new material there which I'd like to study a bit closer. Yeah, thanks. A couple of points. There's no mention in this in this report, well, there were two things that happened. Yesterday we had the air quality, the air quality briefing, and we are discussing air quality later on today. But I think that we really need to look at what we are promoting in terms of growth with the impact on air quality, because it's quite clearly now a critical factor for the health of everybody. And the second aspect, which hasn't been covered as far as I can see in this, is the ending of furlough. We are expecting a massive increase in unemployment, unfortunately, as a result of the ending furlough. And I think we ought to think in terms of trying to focus what growth is possible or even desirable against the requirement to provide employment for particularly the younger people who are going to find themselves in trouble. And I don't think those 2 points, I don't think that has been addressed in here. I can't see any reference to it, but that is an issue. Just for the record, once again, there was a reference there to the Blaby plans, and I really don't like interfering in Blaby, but the impact of the growth units ambitions for junction 2 of the M69 area will have an impact on Hinckley and Bosworth, as will the rail freight depot if that continues. There's now this is seen as a massive threat in the Hinckley and Bosworth area, and I'm going to have to continue to raise these concerns. It comes up again in the next report, I know, but it's at the back of my mind about the assumption that that the communities between that are affected between Burbage, Sapcot and Stony Stanton are all in favour of this of these schemes, and I haven't seen any evidence that in fact those communities want all this activity to take place. But I'll raise it again at the next report, and I'm sorry to keep repeating myself, but I think the threat to our countryside it has to be taken into account, as well as the need for additional growth. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. I expected you would, and I expect again that this will be a key area for discussion of what the impact of the white paper will have on our countryside as well on the 14th. But on the specific issues that Mr. Bill's raised, Simon.
So on the air quality briefing, I have made reference to the role the growth unit's taking in terms of assessing not just the county council's commitment, but the longer term environmental challenges and what impact that has within the strategic growth plan and the county council strategic plan and the outcomes that exist. So we're doing some work with colleagues in the environment and transport department to look at what that impact has, and the same applies to your issue, I guess, around furlough and the impact that COVID will have on unemployment. Again, there's a need to look at movements and developments, and the growth unit will play a part in considering that. Your last point around Hinckley, again, the purpose of this report is to look more at the unit's role as opposed to specific sites, but any collaboration with Blaby, I'm sure, will include Hinckley and Bosworth where it's appropriate, where there is an impact on any schemes proposed within that district.
Okay, and are you okay to share these slides?
Yeah, happy to do. Joe can do that if that's okay, straight after the meeting.
Thank you.
Simon, before I finish, could I just raise an additional point? If you look at today's agenda and the report of the last meeting, going back to on page 6, this was when Sharon Scott from Sapcut raised the question of the need for a review of the assumptions in the strategic growth plan. It was said there by Tom Purnell that there would be he envisaged a review of the overall requirements. I did raise that at MAG, but I was told there that it was not, I didn't get the impression in the MAG meeting that there was any there was any appetite for looking at a review. So could I just ask, when will there, picking up Sharon Scott's point from our last meeting, can I please ask, is there going to be a review and who is going to carry it out? Thank you.
Chair, I mean, as I understand it, the position of MAG was clear that the strategic growth plan is constantly under review. It's an evidence-based plan that will reflect new evidence as it comes forward, whatever the subject that is relevant to. So I think that's the position that the MAG are taking. And you know, again, sorry to repeat, as an evidence-based plan, it's as new evidence comes forward, alterations to the plan will no doubt take place.
Okay, David.
Okay, I look forward to the. I look forward to continuing the dialogue. Thank you.
I mean, again, the white paper is going to drive a coach and horses through the strategic growth plan, should it become in its present guise, but perhaps in the opposite direction than we'd hoped. Right, Rosita Page.
Thank you, Chairman. Very much of a comment. In my opinion, especially with the points Terry mentioned and dealing with the future white paper, I think the growth unit is now more important than ever. And to me, it is very, very important that we identify needs. And I know that Simon referred to it in one of his slides, but I think what we should do is add to it to not only identify needs, but to ensure the delivery at source. Because if you have the white paper and money goes centrally, and it is redistributed, we could find ourselves with development in certain areas, but not the necessary funding for the infrastructure. I also think we need to look at flexibility because, for instance, what we are doing now, it is we have a very narrow-minded approach on Section 106. For instance, bus stops. So at the moment, I believe we have a backlog of 111 bus stops that need to be delivered, but we haven't got the ability. So I think within the growth unit, one needs to look at the delivery of the projects as well. And with the white paper coming forward, this is my concern. Can we make sure that everything we have got can be delivered in the timeline, because we don't know what's going to happen to the projects as they stand now. You know, will there be, so that is my main concern. But referring to the health action plan and what David just said, I think we should also have a mention for your growth plan and your growth plan ambition by saying simply ensuring that air quality and environmentally friendly measures are considered wherever possible. Because if you have that as an ambition, then it is marked down as a priority towards future development. And my last point, it is, and I mentioned it last time, it is to set out a clear process of delivery mechanism, because there will be so much confusion in how to deliver, how to do it, who does it. So if we have a clear process by flowcharts, and I know I've said that before, then everybody knows where to start and how to deliver the outcomes. And they're just a general. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosita. Can you respond to those points, Simon?
Yeah, quickly. Yeah, I would agree. I think the role of the growth unit will change as a result of the white paper coming forward. But I think its key purpose of protecting the council's financial best interest and at the same time supporting the delivery of growth won't change. I think some of the challenges will be different and some of the responsibilities might be different. But I think the growth unit's role will be really important. The ambition to support air quality and environmental considerations is a good point, and I think it's reflected in some of the work that we're doing, but not specifically in the focus of the unit. So I think it would be good to add that. And in terms of a standardised delivery mechanism, I mean, that would be an ideal position to reach. But of course, the challenge is that every development's different. Each district's local plan is at a different stage and is managed in a slightly different way, I suspect. So the ability to have a consistent single approach for the growth unit to support delivery would be difficult. But I understand entirely where you're coming from, Mrs. Page, on that.
Okay.
I've hopefully responded to all the points that Mrs. Page has raised.
Yeah. Bill Bolter, please.
Thanks, Chair. Most of my points have been answered, actually, but I was concerned, there should be a review after COVID-19. And the other thing is that, as I say, it's a question about the 106 and what's going to happen. Normally, we end up worse off. So I'm a bit concerned that. So anyway, that's for the next meeting. So my question's been answered. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this now. Various members have raised the financial implications of this, and you have again, Simon, in saying that part of the role is to protect the council's financial interest, and this idea that we're going to have to upfront fund more infrastructure. I'll leave it to you to think about, but whether we ought to ask someone to come from strategic finance in 2 weeks' time, just to get their views on what the impact of that might be if it was to come to fruition. Can you see the linkage?
I can. I've not referred to the governance that sits around the work that the growth unit does, actually. So I report to the Growth Delivery Board, which is the corporate management team, with a specific focus in that meeting around growth. So clearly Chris Tambini plays a crucial role in that. And there's also a growth unit steering group that meets on a fairly frequent basis that finance are heavily involved with as well. So along with key players like John Bennett, like Nick Thomas around the Section 106 piece. So that coordination at a senior level happens on a fairly regular basis. But the role of finance is crucial, of course.
Okay, so are you happy, Bill, to leave that to the 14th to pick up your concerns, which Terry's already touched on?
Yes.
Okay, we'll ensure they're addressed. Okay, thank you. I've now got Terry Eynon.
Thank you, Chair. I very much welcome the growth strategy. I think back to the Cabinet meeting on the 26th of June, where we had two papers came, which I feel are relevant to the need for this. One was the Melton Self-Sustainable Neighbourhood, which was thought to be non-viable, and the other one was the Coalville Transport Strategy, which is something that I've been following ever since I was first elected, where there's been a tendency to put in huge numbers of houses and get piddling amounts of money from the developers for the roads, which will then be completely inadequate to the extent that the 49 million that we're getting for the A511 in North West Leicestershire isn't going to cut it. And it was lovely to see in that paper that this council seemed to actually promise to have teeth and suggest that it might even go, oh well, we don't think you can actually build this, and tell the planning committee that, which we just never see, generally speaking, at district level. There's been a kind of decades of rolling over in the face of unsustainable development. I, like everyone here, I have fears about what the government will impose on us in the form of the new white paper. I think it's bad enough as it is. So I'm very pleased that we've got the growth unit finally pulling us together so that we can do battle for our communities at last. And then to come to my favourite, which is, of course, health. And I'm really pleased that Andrew Williams thinks he can take it on. I do think that anyone who thinks that they can take it on probably doesn't understand the problem. It isn't getting the money. There was a paper which came to the recent Scrutiny committee at North West Leicestershire, which showed that we'd got 1.3 million sitting in our coffers, which had gone up since the last time we whinged about them keeping too much money. This isn't about getting the money in. It's about the fact that the NHS, because of the way it was structured in 1948, all the GPs who are this money is collected for are private contractors to the NHS, and the struggle is getting them to spend it. So really, it would be nice if with the help of the growth unit, Andy Williams can actually get to understand what the problem is. I suspect that this is going to need to be challenged at a much higher level. So my question is, when can we have more information on how exactly he's getting on with this and what progress he's making with our help to understand the problem he's got?
I mean, picking up on that, I could imagine, Simon, that there could also be tensions between the statutory consultee, whether it be us through environment and transport or the district, of this issue in the MPPF about, you know, on the roads, is it severe enough to sustain saying what Terry Einan has said, that maybe this can't be delivered? So there must be tensions there arising sometimes where what can actually be said, which is then defendable should it go to appeal.
Yeah, again, absolutely. Those tensions do exist, and they sort of played out in the recent Lutterworth East planning permission that went through last month. And his ambition is laudable. You know, he does want to understand the challenge. He wanted to address the Section 106 discussions around Lutterworth in a very different way, in a much more joined up way, with all the different players within the health family. So his ambition is the right thing. I can't promise that we can, you know, make radical reform, you know, with Andy, but we'll certainly give it a good go. And, you know, he seems, with his colleagues, really committed to working differently with the County Council, both on a project by project basis and a longer term one as well. But again, as you both alluded to, the white paper may well play a significant role in how that might pan out. But it's a conversation and a relationship that we've not had in the past, and that's what the growth unit is bringing to the table.
Okay, thanks for that. Now I've got Dan Harrison. Are you okay to contribute, Dan?
Yes, I am. All I'd like to say, Chairman, it's been a very good debate, and Simon's answered lots of interesting questions by members, and I've just sat here and thought, you know, thank goodness we have got a growth unit, because I think it's going to be invaluable as we move forward. So that's my contribution. Just say well done, and just keep more power to your elbow, Simon. That's what it's all about. Thank you.
Okay, so I think that doesn't need a response. I think that's a thumbs up for the work that you're doing. I think that has been useful in gaining a better understanding of the unit. But personally, I've also realised the tensions that you have, both in what's coming forward from above, as it were, but also the tensions that are going to come and exist in how we actually press home some of these needs that we'd all agree with are absolutely essential to achieving a sustainable development and a nice place to live, but what is possible within the restrictions imposed by the MPPF and other planning regulations. So I'm sure this is something we will want to come back to. So could I thank you for that this morning, Simon, and we will see you in less than 2 weeks on the white paper.
You will.
So I now just need to slightly change the agenda, because we've got a key report on air quality, and the director, Mike Sandys, does need to get away by 1 o'clock. So realising the importance of this, I know a lot of members are concerned about air quality. I'm going to, with your agreement, move that and take this next, and then we'll come back to the corporate asset investment fund. Okay, so have we got Mike Sands with us?
Yep. Yes, I'm on.
Thank you, Mike. So I'd like to start then with you introducing the report. I know you've got a colleague with you as well.
Yeah, will do. Thanks, Chair, and thanks for moving the agenda around. My wife makes a common joke, which is she only knows it's the weekend because I'm not wearing headphones, and today is another day when I'm just back to back. So I've got another meeting at 1, which I do need to attend. And you can guess what that's about.
I can, yes.
Yeah, I think we all could, couldn't we? So anyway, the purpose of the report is to provide the Scrutiny Commission with an update on work being undertaken with partners across Leicestershire on air quality, and the draft air quality and health action plan's been appended. Clearly, a number of members would have been on the all-member briefing yesterday, which to some extent sort of morphed from a briefing into a bit of a scrutiny session as well, which I thought was really, really useful. Doubtless we'll revisit some of those questions within the Scrutiny Commission, because I think it would be worthwhile just capturing those. I know I've had some thoughts with both Kelly, who's going to do a summary of the paper shortly, and then Ian Veers, who's also joined us from Environment and Transport, because I thought his input into yesterday was really worthwhile, and it does need to be something which ties together the County Council, and particularly Environment and Transport and Public Health. So with that from me, I'm going to hand over to Kelly just to do a short summary of the report. So all yours, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So hopefully you can all see the screen. I'll just take you through some slides quickly around the situation of air quality and health in Leicestershire, and the work that has been done to date, and what we plan to do to address the poor health outcomes in air pollution. So I'm sure you're all aware the sources of air pollution are the roads and industrial processes. In Leicestershire itself, they're mostly based around the road structure and then the quarrying manufacturing industries. So the impact it has on health, as I'm sure you're aware, there's short-term impacts of people ending up in hospital with asthma, coughing, wheezing, shortness of breath, and all the way through to the long-term effects. So, and lung cancer, respiratory conditions, which leads to reduced life expectancy. So it can affect people throughout their lifetime, from pregnancy right up to the elderly populations, and it also affects those with greater vulnerability. So there is an inequalities aspect, particularly those that might live in areas that are closer to roads with poorer air quality, and those with already underlying health conditions that are respiratory. So you're probably aware there was a joint strategic needs assessment conducted in May 2019, and that formed the basis of what the action plan sets out. So this is the scale of the problem. There are 16 air quality management areas across the county, and they're just plotted there on the map. And as you can see, when you look at particulate matter, PM 2.5, it does follow the road network. So, as Mike mentioned, it's one of the biggest environmental hazards in terms of mortality. Preventable deaths due to PM2 is the third leading cause of preventable deaths, and that's approximately, we could prevent 88 deaths a year. So then if you look at the fraction mortality attributed to particulate matter, that's about 5% of all cause mortality. So when you look at them, then the burden of ill health across the borough, the district councils as a rate per 100,000 population. So this takes into consideration attributable deaths and disease due to air pollution, but also the underlying lifestyle population factors. And then if you estimate that to 2035, you can see obviously the numbers are increasing, in particular in Oby and Wigston, and particularly looking at diabetes and coronary heart disease. And again, if you then look at NO2 data, it has more of an impact on diabetes, and then predicting that into the future, the numbers increase quite considerably. So back in October 2019, there's a workshop with partners to determine what the vision could be for the county, and then what we should prioritise of what needs to be done. So the vision is suggested in here around to improve air quality in the county and reduce the impact of air pollution on the environment, human health, and the contribution that makes to reducing health inequalities. We came up with 4 aims of how we would achieve this. And then there are actions, which hopefully you can all see within the paper, so I won't necessarily go through them. There were 3 priorities out of the workshop that we thought we should focus on first, and that was around planning and development of strategies and proposals. So I think some of those have been mentioned previously in this meeting, around healthy design guides, and then how we promote active and sustainable travel across the county, and how we ensure that the information is shared and we have a joined up approach to behaviour change campaigns, so consistent messages across the county. And following on from yesterday, I think some of the reflections that we've had, that actually the plan needs to involve more around how air quality or air pollution is measured, and then what mitigations are in the place. So opportunities for mitigation now, and then opportunities for mitigation in the future. And then following this, the next steps of this plan is for it to be endorsed across the local authorities. The last organisation to take it to their cabinet is North West Leicestershire. That's in December 2020. And then the plan will obviously be implemented. And there is a partnership group that are in place to implement that. And we propose that the progress of this will be reported via the Unified Prevention Board, with oversight from the Health and Wellbeing Board. That's it. If there's any questions, or Mike or Ian, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Just a sort of quickie for me, just building on those last slides. So I think it's paragraph 24 on page 90 of the meeting pack that sets out the 3 main the 3 foci of the action plan. And again, I suppose the conversation yesterday, in my mind, people would get active and sustainable travel as being something that we are already working on, and Ian might want to come in, and the need to do joined up comms. But I guess more of the questions yesterday, which we need to maybe reflect in the action plan, is around that influence on planning and development strategies. And again, I think some of that mitigation, not just dealing with future plans and the growth plan, but also how do we actually mitigate the effect of current developments in the current environment on air quality, I thought was a really good point, well made. On the back of that, the original intention was obviously Scrutiny Commissioner considering the action plan today, with a view towards it then going to Cabinet in September. I've spoken to Kelly and Ian already about we might just be wanting to shift the Cabinet paper back to October, because I think there'll be enough that comes out of Scrutiny Commission now that it will need more than just an appended minute, and actually a bit of a rethink, particularly around the mitigation and measurements as Kelly's laid out. But Ian, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just to add, I'm sure this will come out in the debate from members. Essentially, you've already started talking about the planning white paper, which will have massive impacts, or could do, if it goes through in some of its forms, on the planning process and development. Coupled with, we've seen some real shift in the government speak recently as a result of COVID around walking, cycling, scooting, and other health initiatives, which I find very encouraging, and hopefully will follow through. So happy to take any questions, Mike. Chair.
Okay. So is that it, Mike? Does that complete the presentation?
Yep, all done.
Thank you very much. That was very slick, if I may say so. Right, so we're going to move on to questions now. I've got a number of members who would like to ask some questions or make a comment. So I'm going to start with Dr. Feltham.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I won't make points I made yesterday about Zephyr and having a wonderful gadget outside my new house to measure all this stuff. I think the point I really want to pick up on is particularly about the Air Quality and Health Partnership Group, because I can see that being absolutely critical in this, bearing in mind it's districts that put together air quality management areas and therefore action plans on that. And the county really are only there much more as a consultee. And that's why I think the fact we're bringing it through effectively a health side is good. And it's really trying to give that particular group as much teeth as they need in order to do something about this. I mean, just one little anecdote. Because we now have an air quality management area on the A6 in Kibworth, some of the planning applications that have come up recently, very much the district environment team who look at the air quality have been very vocal in their comments made to the planning planners, be it planning committee or if it's done not at the planning committee, about the need to be sure not to make the air quality worse. I think it needs district people to really have teeth. And clearly highways, you've already mentioned it, have this particular issue that got to make it a severe issue before they'll come in and object. But in my opinion, locally around where I am, certainly the district planners and the district environment team have worked very well together. And it hasn't always stopped the developments, but it has certainly mitigated it. Just at that sort of point, really. But I said, I'd like to see that Air Quality and Health Partnership Group really have some teeth and really get on with it. Thanks very much.
So if I could just respond to that again, I'll look to Ian and Kelly. I think it's an interesting one. It's one of the debates we were having after the all-member briefing yesterday is, in my mind, the right thing to do is you would want to do this by consent and have a partnership which recognises that we all need to work together on this. I think maybe one of the issues for me is just as a county council and as the public health authority, maybe being a bit more directive about what we need to see within district plans, so we don't just end up with a kind of coalition of the willing, but we are actually challenging districts to go a bit further. And Ian, I don't know if you want to sort of come in on that, because I know it was your thoughts yesterday about how much has been you, for instance, as E&T, sort of to some extent taking it from districts and going, what can you do for us? Whereas actually we need to be putting forward a view that, no, this is what we need you to really push within your planning and your growth policies. But I don't know if you want to pick up on that one.
Yeah, just to reiterate, obviously we're a consultee on how the highway operates, and unfortunately we're not a consultee on the environmental and amenity issues, the air quality that the impact of traffic can have. But what we will always do, and I'm glad that in Harbour we've been able to support in other areas, we will supply the data they need. We can supply that expertise to do that predictions and modelling so that they can have the teeth to go back on applications. But it's very much, as we are at the moment, down to the planning authorities and their environmental officers to come in and go, this is the problem with air. It's a strange system, isn't it? The culprit's are traffic, but it's not us who have responsibility for and can even comment on it. So
how is that assessed then, Ian? Is that something that one of the traffic models does then?
Yes, so as part of our capabilities with our modelling, we can assess future air quality issues. So, for example, the City Council got their air quality management areas given an awful lot of money because they have to predict what their interventions will then do. So you into normal planning terms of what's severe and what's not, what will work. And we actually have the capability to be able to do that. So we've done the same for Blavey with their air quality area and directive. But we're able to give that advice also on predicting traffic levels and what fumes and so forth that will generate for all the gases. So we do have that capability. Of course, we have to be asked to do it.
Oh, okay. You don't do it automatically then, you wait to be asked.
No, it's not our roles, Chair. I could comment on lots of things that aren't my role. Unfortunately, I can't. It wouldn't carry any weight, and I might get into trouble if I started doing it. But I'm very happy to support our district members, especially if it improves things for our residents.
So what you're saying is you provide the data, but it's up to them to interpret that and decide what weight to give it in the decision.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair.
Okay, I think that's helpful. And that brings back to Mike's point about not just waiting to be asked, but saying, what are you doing about this? Okay, right.
Yeah. I was going to say, Chair, it's welcome me into the world of public health, where the ability to comment on things that you're not directly responsible for is often the case, but we probably need to take that opportunity in this case.
Well, I would agree. There's no better time. In the public's mind, the role of public health has probably never been as high. So the opportunity is there. This is just another strand of it, possibly worse in terms of the kind of numbers that you're saying could come about. Right, I've got Tom Bartley next, please. Can you hear us, Tom? Tom, I'll come back to you. Terry Einan, can you come in next?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and and I thank both the officers for this excellent paper. The JSNA driving public health in this and air quality is something some of us have been waiting for some time. I guess one of the issues that I want to address, though, is not the aspirations that are in here, not the desire to make this happen, but I think one of the biggest holes for me in the paper are the ones that people have been trying to fill in this meeting, and Ian Veers, I think, did a fairly good job of it. What are the political and administrative barriers that are preventing us from doing anything about this? I think Kevin Felton mentioned that districts need to want to do this. Well, why should they? They clearly don't particularly want to do this, or at least that's been my experience. I know that when a motion was brought to North West Leicestershire District Council on this issue, I think it was in 2017, it was, oh, well, we don't really want to do lots more measuring and monitoring because we want to build houses and have quarries. So what we do in North West Leicestershire is we plan for more housing, bang slap next to the quarry. Great. So I think that I'd like to see a section in this paper actually explaining who is responsible for what and why, therefore, this isn't being all joined up and why we aren't doing what we're doing. And also then look at some of the enablers to this. One of the things that I think came up in the briefing, which was a very good meeting, was that we need much more monitoring. We're not actually measuring PM 2.5s in many areas, even in places where we obviously should be looking at that DEFRA modelled paper, the map with the horrible orange smog all over North West Leicestershire, where I happen to represent, and other areas too. So we need much more monitoring, and we need that monitoring also not just to protect our people, but to protect our businesses as well. This isn't, we need to be working with our businesses, like the airport, like the quarries. You can't exactly move a quarry or an airport easily. Many of them will have been there for decades. What we can do is stop planning to build bang slap round these places where PM 2.5s are almost certainly going to be higher, and we would know that if only we measured them. And we need to be working with those industries to do that measuring. So can we when we do the rewrite, and I'm really pleased there's going to be a bit of a rewrite, can we be much clearer about what we'd like to do and why we're not doing it and what needs to change in order to make it actually happen, so that when we put our comments in and they go into the local plans, we need also to be clear that when we put these things in the local plans, are we still going to find that we still can't fight off unsustainable planning applications that only add to problems with air quality? We need to be honest about that with our public.
Okay, I think the other point, Terry, you make it, most environmental health teams are run on a shoestring anyway. They're lucky if they have 2 qualified environmental health officers, because they also have to do food and commercial and do noise complaints. It's not just in environment, and this is a major issue as well, that if we're going to want them to input and spend the time, because in the end they've got to make it stand up. If it's going to be used as an objection in the way you're suggesting, it's got to be able to be stood up with the evidence to support it. And I would suggest that environmental health departments will require more resources to do that properly. But that's kind of related to what you're saying.
It's a very point and needs to go in the same section on why we aren't doing this or why it's going to be difficult. Yeah.
So Mike is nodding his head in terms of, I think, agreeing that some of these issues could be picked up and added to the report.
It's absolutely easy for me, because I'm just going to look at Kelly and go, can you do that? And at this point, Kelly nods her head and goes, yes, Mike, by next week, which I'm sure is doable, isn't it, Kelly? But I think actually it is very good, right answer. But I do think it's a point well made. I think we obviously discussed measuring and monitoring yesterday, and actually what we would want to see, but also accepting the barriers around money and environmental health capacity again would be worthwhile detailing. I think the bit about being clear about who's responsible, again, that should be jokes apart, should be a relatively easy hit to build into the action plan, and would make it then clearer what we collectively as local government at both tiers are kind of bringing to the party. And I think generally, if COVID has sort of taught us one thing, and I'm not trying to make a link with COVID at every opportunity at the moment, that pretending that somehow you are not responsible for something that happens in your area is, you can't get away from it. It will land on your doorstep, whether you like it or not. And air quality, I would suggest, is another one where I know districts have varying input and interest in air quality. But there's no getting away from kind of, whether you like it or not, it's your area and you need to take responsibility for the health and well-being of residents in your area. This way forward, I think the partnership work gives us a way of doing that, but we probably do just need to strengthen a sense of it's not a nice to have, it's a must do. And I suppose that's the main point that I sort of picked up from yesterday.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input there, Terry. Right, let's just see if we can go back to Tom Barclay.
Thank you, Chair. I think Terry made a lot of the points. I mean, it is the responsibility of the district. Some take it on to a greater degree than others. What we can do about what has happened in the past is possibly we can put mitigation in, but that's not going to make a big difference. To me, it's a question of how much will there is to bring air quality to the top of the agenda, how much pressure we can bring on the planners, and how, if this really is considered as a material planning matter, whereby we could successfully turn down an application for a major development based on the impact of air quality, and whether that would stand up in front of a building inspector or whether he'd simply decline it and we'd end up with a lot of money to pay out as a district or whatever. The monitoring around the county, we could probably step it up, but then you've got to consider what are we actually able to do about it and what are we going to do about it. Because unless there's an appetite in the planning, we've talked about the white paper coming forward. Is this even mentioned? I don't know. Is it a priority? Is it a priority for the districts? Is it a priority to the residents? It's clearly very important, but it's what we can actually do after we've monitored it with more monitoring and how much appetite there is to do it. I mean, clearly it's with a white paper coming forward and the housing numbers possibly even doubling above those where we are now, it's not going to go away. And as you so rightly say, it is a responsibility of the area, but it's getting a high profile and actually having a plan, because I feel it's just sort of pushed between district planners, county. It's the district's responsibility and principally the planners. And to my mind, without the authority to do something, the planners aren't going to do anything. I can't do anything.
Right. Okay. Well, you're highlighting the problem. I mean, my grandfather always used to talk about air pollution from fossil fuel and the smogs that used to cause in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. And it was addressed. It's not a problem now, is it? So they must have thought that was something that was insurmountable, but they dealt with it. But it was largely through legislation in the end that brought about these zones. So it can be done. But as you say, is there a will? Right. I've got Bill Bolter next.
Thank you. My question is quite worrying, rather, the figures in Oakley and Wixton. You've shown us we haven't got any major roads in Oakley and Wixton. So why are we so much higher than anywhere else? What causes that? Is it industrial processes that caused this in the past, or are we living with the effects of poor communities where smoking is more prevalent? How do we address it? How do we break it down so we can fight the figures that we've been presented with?
Right. Go on, Kelly, do you want to take this one?
Yep. So I probably need to do a bit more digging into Oakley and Wixton, but I understand it's one of the more urban areas within the county. So urban areas generally have greater air pollution than the rural areas. So that would be maybe one hypothesis. And then in addition to that, with the population themselves, I don't know if there's greater number of more older people there, and they might have more of the risk factors to some of the diseases that were shown.
So probably a bit of a combination of both, because I did look up the what's it called, the attributable mortality fraction from air pollution in North, and Oby and Wigston's got the second highest of districts in Leicestershire. Funnily enough, Blaby's got the highest. And I think if you then set that alongside the population characteristics of Oby and Wigston, as Kelly says, in terms of black and minority ethnic population, Wigston levels of deprivation, etc., etc. I think the two, to multiply the two together, comes up with that kind of rate per 100,000 expected instance of diseases like diabetes, which goes some ways to explaining it. So proximity to the city, if you like, and demographics, and probably explains why Oby and Wigston figures look worse.
Okay, well, we don't meet any air quality management area thresholds in Oby and Wigston, so that's low. It's just that I'm just concerned that it's not really air pollution then, is it, that's causing the problem? It's other factors.
Well, no, I mean, I think air quality management areas are interesting because, again, I think some of the plan is about trying to switch the focus from point sources of air pollution, so where we've got roadside monitoring down the A6, which are not extreme. They're acute for the individuals, but we know, as Ian would say, that those levels of pollution drop off quite sharply as soon as you get sort of, not that far away from the roadside. What the air quality plan is about is really the overall sense of what air pollution, whether it comes from roads, transport, industrial processes, quarrying, what that adds to the general mix. And of course, that's then obviously more than one thing. So that's where, and I suppose there is something about not just looking at air pollution as a whole, but then thinking through the susceptibility of a population to being on the non-scientific word, the rough end of a pineapple from the effects of air pollution. And again, Oby and Wigston probably has got a population that's more susceptible to suffering illness as a result. So, I think it's a slightly different debate than we've had in the past around people being up close and personal to point sources of pollution in a more general sense of what does pollution mean to the population we will serve.
In that case, can Kelly work with officers at Oby and Wigston to identify what the problem is, and so we can do something about it?
Yeah, of course.
There's an invitation then. So you've achieved something there, Bill. Perhaps you need to look at doing some more monitoring to try and pin it down a bit.
Well, we do. We've got numerous test tubes throughout the borough. We're establishing an air quality monitoring station when we get through all the legislation on a stretch of road. So, yes, if you can work with officers and keep me involved, I'll be very interested. Thank you.
Okay. Right, I've got Dan Harrison next.
Right, thank you, Chairman. A little bit of a rerun of yesterday in some ways, because what concerns me greatly, Chairman, is the narrative has been altered. We've got 88 deaths we may prevent. There's no way of preventing it. How do you measure it? It's not measurable. The only thing that I know is that NHS England say this is a format that they use, and they've predicted 350 deaths in Leicestershire. And we're fudging it now. We're saying, well, let's try and prevent 80 deaths, but we can't measure 80 deaths that we've prevented. We'll have no way of doing that. The way this operates, and I've spent 2 years studying this and battling away on this, is by screening. That means measurements have to be taken. And I think we're fudging it, really. This is a great opportunity we have now where we're trying to organise across the county, and we're looking at it, but we're not actually suggesting screening, measurements, or every district, because I'd love to propose that every district is regularly, their levels are publicised so we know what we're doing. Why is it all so covertly hidden back? Because we should all know that we represent the public, we serve the public. The officers are employed to do jobs, but we're really living with the public. We feel and understand their anxieties. And I think the way this organisation, this group has been set up of officers, chief executives. Now, we as councillors, normally it's our preserve to create policies in conjunction with officers, but where are the county councillors on this group? There should be a county councillor from every district on it, so we understand and we can play a part of the development of this. I just don't think, I think those two things alone on being involved in that discussion, we should have as of right. We're representing the people. We are the politicians. This has been set up without the politicians being involved. We understand what people say to us, and we're closer to the marketplace, if you like, as representatives. And I think that's really important. And I think the mortalities, in what we understand from NHS England, we should be publishing it. Northwest in 16 was 54. The latest assessment is 78. So what we're saying now is that Leicestershire is equal to about 5 Grenfells a year, and Northwest will well have achieved that on their own. Now, what I'm trying to do is say, look at the reality, how serious this is. These are not figures from Dan Harrison. This is NHS England, who are deemed to be the most authoritative body. Also working with DEFRA, they do all the background. The whole thing has been hijacked by companies who do desktop work. So what they do, they don't use DEFRA's background levels to calibrate their machinery. They go off and find some distant tube that's been put up, diffusion tube, incorrectly, like in Northwest Leicestershire, where DEFRA's ruled them out of order, wrong. You see, if we look at the annual status reports, Northwest Leicestershire 2 years where they never even sent one in to DEFRA. Then they sent 2 in at the same time, and the only difference in the documents, of course, was the dates for the 2 years. But what they're saying is, where you have an air quality, an AQMM, is they then have to comment on that area. Our comment in Northwest, we've got 4, we've had for 20 years, no new ones, and yet the population and the business has grown exponentially, and we're doing nothing about it. But in that report, they have to say where they perceive the difficulties coming from. Our reports are, we perceive no difficulties. That's for 20 years. We've had no difficulties, just 4 AQMAs, and that's where we are. Now, I have tried talking to chief executives, to leaders, to officers, even to you, Mike, that have got nowhere with it. I've got nowhere with it. I don't know who to turn to. And here we have a golden opportunity to try and register and get a proper set of how we can detail this to go forward. And I think if we fudge it and say, let's make a number of how many deaths we can save, and I don't mean that disrespectful to you, Mike, how many deaths we can save, and yet we can't measure that, but we can measure and work with NHS England's figures and check our mortalities. And we've got a chance to do something for the people that we all represent. We as councillors, that is.
Okay, I don't want to cut you off, but Mike's only got a few minutes left. So, and I've got 2 other members with questions. So,
like yesterday, I'm gonna agree and disagree simultaneously. I'll pick up the really important point, which is around member representation, and it's not Kelly's fault at all. And indeed, I was probably not really keeping an eye on this as much as I should do, but I think we inherited a situation at the start of the year where it was really a collection of officers that were coming together to do the right thing across districts and county around the air quality action plan. But one of the conversations we had last night following the all-member briefing was, I think it would really benefit from a revisiting of the structure and the setup of all this, because actually political oversight and input from members would be really key. So from that point of view, hence slipping the cabinet paper to October gives chance to just reflect the structure in there, because I do think it's important that this isn't something that happens behind closed doors of living rooms, as it now would be, of just officers. So I absolutely get you on that one. do want to come back to numbers, and I don't want to go to over those because all these figures are modelled to some extent. And just to be clear, there is a lot of science behind preventable mortality, and the 88 is the ones that by taking action gives a scale, gives an indication of the scale of lives that we could reduce mortality by. Just applying the number of people who die in per year in Leicestershire and then multiplying that by the attributable mortality fraction, I think would really oversell our ability to take action. Again, it comes down to the point of somebody who's 101 who dies of a heart attack. If you then say 5% of all those people die of the causes of air pollution, I think really it's about premature mortality and avoidable mortality as much as the all cause. It's not to disagree with you, but I think we just need to be clear in our minds around how much effort, how much effect we can really make, as opposed to over-promising and under-delivering. But the important thing, I think, is to get the visibility done.
Okay, right. I've now got David Bill.
Yeah, very quickly, Chairman. Can I ask that that all the sentiments that have been expressed on this today are encapsulated in a report which will go presumably to the cabinet, and then perhaps through to the any consultation that takes place on the new planning white paper. I mean, I think we're all in one accord on this, and it just. Could I just ask if that is it's brought together by the officers so that we have it summarises where we stand this morning. Could I just have a look at on page 102 of the report? We've got this famous map which is mostly blue, but which shows the brown lines where the roads are and where northwest Leicestershire is. It always seems to me odd that we have these kind of maps which stop at the county boundary and the city boundary, and we're never given too much thought to what actually happens on the other side of the tracks, as it were. Is it possible, for example, to get the city's figures? Because if it's true that the Oban Wigston problem is due to the fact that it's a very dense urban area, then presumably the same problem is there in the city as well. We really need the overall picture to judge what's going on. Can I leave that thought with you?
Yep, fair comment. Actually, I think that's something we can add in, and it would be useful, I think, just to know what's going on in the surrounding areas. I can remember from the national document, I'm sure there was something, I don't know, there was a huge percentage of air pollution, not just in Leicestershire, but this country, which is actually comes, just drifts in from other sources. So we do need to detail that one.
Mike, sorry, it's Ian, just to add, with the city's directive areas, and obviously that impacts, and they've been having a number of conversations with districts, Oban, Wigston, Blaby, touches a bit into Charnwood. That would be a good bit, just so members are aware to include, and that's all readily available. And it shows also what can be done if you've got such a big problem.
Okay, your point's taken, David. Alan Pearson.
Yeah, thank you. Just to change back to development again, as you're aware. Sorry, that's the main line. I'll just let it ring through. Let me just turn it off. 2 seconds.
I'll come back to you, Alan. Terry Richards.
Yeah, come back.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of very quick points. I just thought in some ways to bring it back to the real world. We can monitor all we like. I have got one of these areas partly in my division, which is Enderby Road, Whetstone. Now, the only solution to reducing pollution on Enderby Road, Whetstone is to have another road, probably coming off somewhere near Langham Bridge in Narborough, which would have been achieved had the road that was due to be built for the Empire Stone development happened, which would have solved the problem. So the question is, you can't solve some of these issues unless there's funding for infrastructure, and we then got to get residents to accept the only way to improve this is to build another road somewhere else. And also, we're never going to achieve some of the issues as well, as I've seen the ministerial letters, because we are not allowed to use pollution from motorways in our calculations. So if you have a motorway running through, the pollution comes from the motorway, but when you go back to government with a response about what you're going to do about pollution, you cannot include action being taken on the motorway. And until we get the motorway network included within the criteria of how we do this, it's a pointless exercise. So I, for one, would actually welcome the fact. I mean, you know, this to me is one area where there should be one body, and I suspect to me it should be the transport authorities should be responsible for monitoring and should be responsible for the action plan.
Yeah.
Right, you've got a lot of nodding there from senior officers, so I'm going to make that point again, that in the past these problems have only been solved by legislation at a national level, which has imposed new standards and new regimes. But I still think we have to do everything we can locally, and I think this plan is a good start in moving us forward with some of the comments that members have made both yesterday and today, how we might improve it. So point taken, Terry. Right, Alan, are you back?
Yeah, my apologies for that. It's another line never rings, and it rang then. Yeah, just back to the development. As you know, we've been through a number of issues here, Malton, with the Relief Road developments on Thorpe Road. My question is, the main beneficiary of any development isn't the district, if I'm right. It's the county council, Leicestershire. When it comes to 106 funding, everything else, council tax. So is there a conflict there from the county council point of view regarding the approval of or major developments in regard having these developments benefits the Leicestershire County Council, irrespective of air quality, etc., because of the funds it brings in? To prevent them would cause some issues. Am I correct in thinking that? Could there be a conflict in regard to some of the approvals and going forward?
Do you want me to take that one, Mike? I mean, just from a highways point of view, Chair, we are only allowed to ask for monies towards condition section 106 that's mitigating severe impacts. We're not there to benefit. We can't fix existing problems. If we do, that's a happy coincidence. But, you know, the SIL regulations are very, very firm, which is part of the white paper again that causes quite a bit of concern. So, you know, we don't benefit from the monies coming in. It's the case of it usually gives us more issues to sort out, as has been discussed here, and I'm sure many members will know. We often don't get the right level of resource. They only have to do their bit of their problem. Often we need to put far more in, which we've been doing for many years.
Okay.
Yeah, because cumulative effect then, where you manage to get a little bit of money, but actually then something else pops up down the road and you haven't solved the problem at all. So the whole lot is interconnected.
But some of the funds, well, wait a second. I've got to talk personally of the Thorpe Road, the hospital site there. I think we've Homes England have given us, and 600,000 will go to a county council school project.
Hold on.
Mike, so I'm not just talking about environment.
Yeah,
I'm talking that.
I suppose that.
Do you need to go, Mike? Because I know
go on. I can hang on for a bit. I'll just dial in late to my next meeting. I mean, people will know better than me, but I mean, I don't think any authority ever got rich off the back of an S106. And,
no. Because there's still funds there, and we're in a unprecedented situation where we're changing plans. Finance is an issue. Is there a conflict? That's all I'm saying. Could we?
I think one of the interesting things, if I'm picking up your point correctly, is, and you heard about this as part of the growth unit, a development and its viability and how much it has to pay for its own mitigation is a really difficult discussion in any planning. The county council looking at its own arse and the growth unit, and we've been getting better at this now, so you're not having them separately, you're having them jointly, because we may have to make sacrifices on what's the most important ask, and that will be politicals, because there's lots of nice, there's lots of wants, there are lots of actually needs, and we're having to make those decisions all the way through. So I was going to say the word beneficiary, that I've never ever thought of that as part of a developer. It's only ever, okay, that gives us more to do, and hopefully sometimes it's the right stuff, but beneficiary is an interesting term.
The problem is there's a finite amount of money that a development will stand before they say it's not viable and we can't do it and you're preventing us from doing it. So then the argument becomes how you cut the cake. and who are the winners and who are the losers. And that's the most difficult bit. In the end, the planners have to make that decision. Take your point, Alan, but
well, you know, I think hypothetically, let's just talk hypothetically. The county council then threatens a district to take legal action if they don't accept the bulk amount of funds that are coming from 106. Hypothetically, so we want the full amount, which is fair enough. I'm not arguing that. I'm not accepting, and we want to challenge whether it's affordable housing, etc. So there is still, from a LCC point of view, we want some money. We want our money back, or some of it, whatever we can get, whether it's going to cover whatever. Surely that is going to dictate sometimes how we feel about air quality. Well, actually, we've got to weigh that up, but we need the funds. If we put that development in, we get that. We can build some schools. Surely there's an issue there, whether it's schools or other aspects of the services we provide.
Chair, the only thing I would say is that the joy of the current system we have in Leicestershire with 2 tiers, the planning authorities, and the consequences of decisions that are made. It's always a discussion and compromise, like you say, for that pot of money that's available.
Yeah.
It's one of those tensions you were talking about earlier with the growth unit and others. It's becoming more of a tension all of the time.
Okay.
Each authority is under an obligation to get the best it can for the services it has a statutory duty for, and that's part of the conflict as I see it.
Well, that's the conflict with the air quality then, isn't it? So we've got to, it's how you weigh the issues up, surely. And this is what we're saying. All I'm saying is our main discussion here is air quality. There's so much more impacting on that when decisions are made, particularly of developments, because it is numbers and developments and roads that make the difference. We all know that. So where there is major development, we see that's where the worst air quality is, along the motorways, you know, whatever. It's common sense.
I mean, turn it on its head. If you heard back that there'd been this great discussion about how to cut the cake, and Ian or his officer who'd gone said, well, that's okay, then we'll just say that we don't need this, and you can have that in health or social housing or wherever, somebody somewhere would get very angry and say, well, you haven't fought your corner. I'm not agreeing one way or the other. I'm just, the tensions involved are enormous. And the bottom line is that you're trying to get a quart. What's the phrase? I got it the right way around. You're trying to get a quart in a pint-sized pot, or the other way around, isn't it? Okay, not sure we can take this much further. It's related to what we're coming back to in less than 2 weeks' time. Can I thank very much Mike Sandys and of course Ian and Kelly for their presentation. I think we've learned a lot about this morning. We haven't resolved it, but I think that to take a bit more time bringing that cabinet report forward, Mike's a really good idea to reflect these additional issues. So absolutely supportive of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, it's gone 1 o'clock. Do you want to have a short? We've got 2 more reports. Do you want to have a short comfort break? I've noticed people have been getting up, or do you want to press on?
Press on, Chairman.
Press
if you
on.
Manage.
Right. You'll leave as you need to.
Yeah, but you cannot.
I can if I have to. Right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go back now to item 12, Corporate Asset Investment Fund Annual Report. This is something that comes to us annually. John Bennett, Head of Strategic Property Services, is going to present this item. Thank you for your patience, John.
No problem.
You around. So, yeah, if you'd like to present the report.
Okay, well, good afternoon. I'll try and keep this brief and just outline some of the key aspects of the Corporate Asset Investment Fund Annual Report that will be presented to Cabinet on September the 18th. Overall, the picture is a good one. I can report a positive performance. The report in the appendix, pages 67 to 85 of your pack, details how the fund has progressed over the last year with comparisons to the wider national market. These are strange, uncertain times for the property industry, and some sectors have performed well and others have performed badly. The impact of COVID-19 isn't fully represented in this report, given the year end is 31st of March, just 1 week after the Prime Minister's announcement of the nationwide lockdown to prevent the coronavirus outbreak. Next year's report will cover the full impact of the lockdown, I'm sure. However, whilst not within the purview of this report, I thought that the Commission would be interested to know that so far the fund has weathered the last 6 months of the storm pretty well, with some new lettings, and none of our tenants have so far gone to the wall as a result of the virus, and our developments are being let. The next 6 months will require close, active management as tenants come out of the protective umbrella of the furlough scheme and the harsh reality of the fallout from lockdown bites. So back to the report. The fund has been in existence for 6 years now and has consistently been performing well thanks to the prudent, careful management and an appropriate approach to both development and investment risk. The objectives of the fund on page 62 are still relevant, pertinent and logical. The addition last year of Objective F has helped ensure that the fund is aligned with the authority's wider aspiration to be a green council and carbon neutral by 2050. In terms of the performance of the fund, as I alluded to earlier, it has been a positive year. Whilst income growth has been flat, overall growth of the fund has been positive, with a 6.2% return compared to the UK All Property Index return of just 0.3%. Holding income, even if just ever so slightly positive, is no mean achievement when other funds are reporting substantial income losses.
Yeah.
The lack of high street retail and leisure has protected the fund from the worst of the storm. The growth in the value of the fund from 132 million as at the end of last year and 171 million at the end of this financial year has been largely as a result of the developments that the fund has been working on for the last year. There's been little growth in either capital value or income received, and with no income producing investments acquired, it has only been the work that's been put into the projects at Colville, Market Harborough and the University Science and Enterprise Park at Loughborough that has driven the value up. Once these developments are completed, fully let, and after the expiration of any rent-free periods, they will jointly generate nearly £2.5 million worth of additional rental income. So whilst the 2019-20 year was a year of development investment, 2021 and the years onwards will reap the rewards. The income from development at Lucet will follow on as it completes this November and the rent-free period starts then. Looking forward once more, there are positives in the income increases from recently completed schemes and the future schemes which are in the planning or the pre-planning phases, such as the solar farm and low carbon units at the planned sustainable environmental scheme at Quorn and the roadside developments at Leaders Farm, Lutterworth. But we have to be mindful that as the UK enters a possibly very deep and long-lasting recession, there may well be direct, substantial, deleterious impacts on the fund. Initially, this may well be that there isn't enough capital for future development, meaning less income growth, but it also may materialise as an increase in voids and bad debts as either tenants go bust or do not renew leases, and it becomes difficult to re-let vacant units. The largest scheme on the fund's portfolio horizon remains Lutterworth East, and whilst Harborough District Council's Planning Committee resolved to grant permission for the 2,750 home scheme recently, there is still work to do on the funding and delivery options, which may also be impacted by the current pandemic. To finish, the 1920 year has been solid, not spectacular, but the fund continues to have a solid base to work from in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for that succinct introduction. Terry Einan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John Bennett, for this report, and thank you for the good news that we are making some money out of this, which is excellent. Looking back at the strategy that underpins this report, which came in to the Cabinet in 2018, one of the specific aims was to not just to support the delivery of frontline services through increased income generation, but also through capital investments that will reduce operating costs. And I think around that time, there was a thought that we might find it useful to look into the social care market, where social care providers, many of them are in premises that cost them huge amounts of money, and that therefore then comes to us eventually, or to our residents, in the form of social care costs. And I was wondering, did we get anywhere with this? And clearly the social care is in the COVID-19 framework it's going to be even more important that elderly people are in premises that are easy to keep clean, and to prevent further outbreaks. So it'd be nice to know where we've got with that. Thanks.
Yes, it was decided last year that the social care investment programme would actually sit alongside the fund. It wouldn't sit inside the fund, in order that the operational reasons for buying properties can be viewed in a more straightforward way, rather than actually a return on investment. It is, what is in the best interest of the service users. Obviously, the best interest in the service users plus a decline in revenue costs for the council, would be the perfect match, and generally that is what is being sought. But the SKIP programme does sit within adults and communities, headed up by John Wilson and Chris Tambini. So that programme is ongoing. It has made acquisitions. We are already converting properties such as Ashby Court in Loughborough, which is an old block that was let to students. It's now being converted for service users for adults and communities. So that does exist, but it's not within the fund.
Okay, Terry. I think this is something that probably needs to also be pursued through adults and communities, because there's been some. This is a two-edged sword. There's been some reports where buildings that are the responsibility of local authorities have gone down this route are now they can't find an operator to take it on, because of the fee rates they're saying are still not high enough, and they're not prepared to take it on. And therefore buildings, I think it was in Liverpool and Wirral, have been built or adapted and converted for residential accommodation and are standing empty. So there are risks involved in from a commercial point of view, never mind a social care point of view, in going down this route. But I'm sure officers are looking at it, but I think it's something that adults and communities should have a look at. I know the chairman is with us today. Right, I've now got Bill Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Question really is how are we going to get the money to invest in these in the future? Because money's getting tighter. The capital programme now is under question. I think Mr. Rhodes is looking at the capital programme. Is he going down the prudential borrowing route now, which he said he wouldn't do? I thought he might be here this morning to answer that question, but he's not. So if somebody else could answer it, or pass it to him.
That's probably an unfair one for John, because that is in the end a political decision whether to go down that route. The council's policy, as you know, we all know, is not to do that at the moment. Mr. Rhodes will be with us on the 14th. When we are having a refresh and update of exactly the issues you're talking about in relation to the MTFS. And the leader has written to me to say, we'll invite Mr. Rhodes, and we have indeed done that. So, yeah, can we come back to that one?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
I think the challenge for John is, in order to take the programme forward, where is the investment going to come from in what looks like being a much tighter situation than we're in at the moment, and that's bad enough. But John, if there's anything you want to comment on, please do.
I would just make the point that at the moment there is no plan to do any external borrowing whatsoever. There is 89 million in the capital programme spread over the next 4 years. How that 89 million is going to be financed That's probably a question, as you said, for either Chris, Declan, or Byron. But from my side, I'm just waiting for the outcome of the capital review to get a full understanding of what the financial horizon is going to look like, so we can then plan accordingly.
Yeah, and the capital review is part of the MTFS review that we're going to look at on the 14th.
Joe, would you like me to pick up on the source of funding for the for CAIF?
Who's that?
It's Declan. Apologies.
Oh, hello, Declan. Yes, if you wish to.
The Oscar Finance, we will appear. The capital programme already included the £260 million that sort of CAIF is targeting. So that had already been covered in last year's MTFS, which was a combination of different sources of funding. Some of it was potentially using internal borrowing, or just sort of utilising the cash resources. But at the moment, there is no need for prudential borrowing. In line with, I suppose, everything, some of the points John's touched on with everything that's going on in the external market, there is an intention to review the CAIF strategy. So things could change after that. But at the moment, to hit the 260 million, it is all from LCC resources at the moment.
But that's part of the review that you've spoke about earlier in previous meetings that's going on at the moment.
So when we did the full review of the capital programme, and obviously with CAIF, because it's revenue income generating, it's a little bit of sort of cutting your nose off to sort of spite your face if we're not careful. So at the moment, the intention is to leave CAIF untouched at the sort of the 260 million, so it can still provide further support to the MTFS. But CAIF itself will have a bit of a review just to make sure it's kind of targeting the right areas in light of the kind of the way that the world's changed around us.
So you're not intending to review the capital that fund has access to to make decisions on investment. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. So it's keeping with the 260 million.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Bill? Put your microphone on.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank
you.
We'll
come back to that at a later date.
Yeah, thank you, Declan. Right, I've now got Mr. Bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. Obviously this is a very optimistic report, and it follows the sort of theme we've had all morning, really, that growth is going to carry on indefinitely. There are, if you actually look through the reports on individual sites, though, that it's clear that they are not all at capacity by any means, and I do wonder whether the economic circumstances that we are now running into, with the ending of furlough, the economic barrier we're going to hit with Brexit, and other challenges, whether it's going to continue at this rate. I do wonder. There's such optimism expressed in here, which I do wonder whether. I hope for everybody's sake that the County Council is justified in expressing such a rosy view of the future. Can I just be once again, though, on record as having being opposed to what's happening on the top of page 80. This is the junction 2 improvement, so-called improvement. I still look at that countryside every day, and I just wish I could see a future for the countryside which involved farms and trees and streams and everything else that we've come to be, that I associate with southwest Leicestershire. I don't look forward to it all being covered over by warehousing. I really don't. So I'd just like to be on record as once again expressing opposition to the junction 2 improvements, or junction 2 developments.
Yeah, and that's related also to the rail freight, isn't it? It's not just development that
yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
I mean, John, you've set out in the report the processes is this going through in terms of the options appraisal being undertaken by the planning authority. Is there anything you can add to that process?
Yeah, well, I'll just go back to the first point with regard to the optimism in the report. I mean, the majority of the report is a look back on how the fund has performed over the last year. Some of the comments with regard to how the units are being let, again, this was to the 31st of March, and as I said, that actually the fund has been quite resilient during the last 6 months, and without wishing to spoil the news for next year's report, the lettings have proceeded very well, and so we're looking at certainly at Airfield, the next phase and the next phase after that, because they are popular. People want to relocate there, and they are good, high quality locations. With regard to Stony Stanton, the comments have been made before and are noted. We're not in the driving seat at the junction to M69 Stony Stanton Sapcut scheme. Blaby wished to see housing development come forward there. Private developers are already pulling together and getting land under control. We have land interests there, and we're going to use that as a lever to try and ensure that any development that does take place there is something that we want to see and has the appropriate infrastructure in it. We are at most 20 or 25% landowner, and that's not enough to be in the driving seat, but it does mean that we can help guide the development that comes forward in collaboration with colleagues at Blaby.
Thanks, David. Anything to add? Want to come back? Leave it at that at the moment. See how the Blaby plan develops. Right, I haven't got anyone else on this report. I think that that's helpful position. If it starts to change during the year, John, perhaps you could flag that up to us, and perhaps you might want to, if it takes a radical change with some of the issues that have been raised in relation to the end of furlough and other things we don't know about in the national budget and so on. We'd ask that you would come back earlier than normal, but only obviously if there is a radical change in the performance of the fund.
Yes, Chair.
Is that okay? But to thank you for coming today.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay. Right. So our last report is the annual corporate complaints and compliments 2019-20, pages 113 to 150. We're being joined now by Assistant Director of Corporate Resources, Roderick O'Connor, and also to the Corporate Complaints and Information Manager, Simon Parsons. Are you both there, gentlemen?
Yes, Chair, we are.
Okay, who would like to start?
Well, Chair, I'm very conscious that you've had a long morning, so I'll do a brief introduction. Hopefully, the commissioners have had an opportunity to read the report. I won't bore you with the reasons why we actually analyze the complaints, but what we've done is we've distilled it down into a number of slides where we'll pull out the main themes. And as Simon and his team do the work, I let him take us through the slides, and then we can take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Roderick. So the slides should be just coming up shortly. The
slides should be up. Can everybody see them?
Yes, the slides are there.
Yes.
Everyone except me, it seems.
Okay. If you just let me know when you want to move through, I'll click through them, Simon.
Okay. So thank you for that. I will start with just I wanted to start really with getting a sense of the wider scene for all complaints activity. As members will know, there's three different types of complaints, so it's often helpful just to give the initial context around the overall volume and general trend. So from that, we've seen a 39% increase over the last 3 years. With fairly significant increase with 759 across all categories.
and probably the largest area of increase of being the corporate complaints, which is the focus of today's report. So that saw a 33% increase with 432. Just on the, although despite the demand across the board, response times have remained good, as the indicators I've given for all complaint types. So 83% still being responded to within 20 working days in 2019 and 20, and that's actually an improvement on the previous year, and a very small number, just 9 outside of our policy maximum of 65 working days. So that's still healthy response times to complaints, which is often which is an important feature of that. If I could just flip across to the next slide, Joe. So we've also seen increased activity from the Ombudsman this year. Perhaps unsurprisingly with the volume increase, and again that reflects a broader national trend of more investigations. So they've investigated 36 decisions in the year, up from 26 the year before, and found more cases of maladministration across the board, so in 16 cases, up from 8. With some fairly significant financial settlements this year, significantly up from the 1,000 last year, up at around the 28,000 figure. And I've broken down what's really driving that, the bulk being in the kind of education services, very much around settlements to recompense for families whose children haven't been in education settings for, in some cases, significant periods of time. Those pressures around that special education sector really mirrors the national picture, where the Ombudsman is upholding close to 95% of all complaints they receive around special educational needs. So and it's that context that really we very much mirror the national picture around clear pressures in that area around that. We also during the year were issued with a draft public report. That's the first time for a number of years, and although we're still challenging that at the moment, it's worth just highlighting attention to that. That's really all around the nursery sector and around the free nursery fees, the 30 hours. It has significant implications for the council, and we think the Ombudsman's got that slightly wrong at the moment. I just wanted to flag that. If I switch to the next slide, just then to break down the areas that are driving that growth. I just wanted to highlight a couple of those. So special education needs I touched on there, with 58 complaints, very much the dominant sector there. Followed by transport and travel services, again, very specific set of issues around the start of the return to the school year there, which saw a number of complaints come through, and that's really all about delays in just getting transport set up, which led to a lot of students not having transport in place at the start of the year. Again, we have some similar issues this year. Again, different reasons. Last year it was the judicial review that caused a late sort of planning of that and condensed that window. This year, very much more coronavirus related that had caused that. But some of those issues are again there this year as well. The other areas causing that are much more less niche in terms of the area of what's causing them, but very much highways related. And really the challenge there is it's very much all the complaint growth there is around people wanting more spend on infrastructure than we can do. So it's very much around those non-high priority jobs. Very few complaints around what we term as the priority 1 jobs, so the serious defects in the highways, the serious issues that need fixing. Very much more around those ones that are on programmed work or on a long list of work to do, and the challenges around timescales of that. And that's where I guess expectation management is absolutely vital, and probably something we can still get a little bit better at. But it's challenging where the finance isn't quite there. The areas that I think that's the kind of the highlights I think really to talk through around what's driving those complaints. But I'll probably pause there, and very happy to take any questions around any of those subject matters.
Okay, so just to clarify, particularly when you were talking about school transport to start with, related and special education needs, that relates to last year, the beginning of the academic year last year. Is that correct? That's the time scale this report's referring to, not just the last couple of days.
No, that's correct, Chair. It is to say the report's obviously by its nature backward looking for the annual report for 1920, so it would pick up the academic year in the September issues around 2019 would be the complaints predominantly in question there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And the increase in money that we're paying out, can you comment on that? Why is that? Is it that the number of complaints being upheld are increasing, therefore the money's going up, or is it that the settlements are getting larger?
It is predominantly down to a number of fairly significant settlements and a very much a set of issues around where very much driven from special educational need placements where either the right support or the right or has not been put in place, or where there's disagreements around a school placement that the authority hasn't dealt with quickly enough. So it's very much around, the Ombudsman will use a scale of financial redress for every month out of education. Two cases in particular were well over a year of being outside of education, and driving up towards settlements of one being in the order of 10,000, another in the order of 7,000. So a big factor in two cases alone there, and a few other smaller ones coming on board. But yes, it's more around the size of a few specific ones than a number of smaller ones.
Okay.
Chair, if I may come in there, forgive me for not putting my hand up. I think Simon would also confirm that it actually mirrors a national trend where across the country the majority of SEN, I can't remember the statistic, perhaps Simon can, but the majority of SEN complaints have been upheld.
Yeah, that's correct. Certainly in the Ombudsman's latest annual report, they talk about and have done for a number of years about SEN being their area of most concern, and it is up around the 9 out of every 10 complaints that they look at, they upheld in that area at the moment.
Thank you for that. Terry Einen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report, Roderick and Simon. It is somewhat depressing, really, to see it going what feels like the wrong direction, and I think certainly on social media I get a lot of complaints, which may never get as far as formal, I suppose, about special educational needs provision, and a lot of unhappiness. And in the concluding comments, it says that there's been a lot of work undertaken to address some of the issues I set out in this report, and I'm sure there has. And clearly, the fact that this is a national issue may be somewhat reassuring, but I don't think that should mean that we don't try and do something about it. And that's certainly mentioned in the report. It remains an area, it says here, where clearly further improvement is required. I'm not entirely clear myself what kind of improvements we should be looking to see, and who is responsible for bringing that about. I know that the Customer Services Department have a very big role in working with staff to ensure that they don't, that they act in ways that prevent complaints and deal with with comments in ways that don't escalate them, and I know you do very good work with that. But I'd like some more detail on what kind of improvements and who's going to bring them about.
Okay, so if within the area of SEN, during the year there's been a focused inspection around the SEN service, and as part of that, a written statement of improvement is being provided to Ofsted, and that sets out a very comprehensive action plan covering all the improvements that are required in SEM. There's a big programme of activity being led by the transformation unit in that area, covering all things from system replacement, process reviews, extra resource, additional capacity, both at manager and officer level has already gone in. A whole programme of work. It's being led by the Director of Children and Family Services, and as I say, and certainly I'm aware, and there was an item tabled at Scrutiny and Overview yesterday on that very matter. It's as I say, I'm not close to the actual detail within that plan, but I can reassure there is a very comprehensive plan in place to address some of the issues that are coming through into the complaints during the year.
Thank you, that's very helpful to know.
Okay, Terry. Alan Pearson.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. If the situation, as you said, Ombudsman, and I've read this quite in detail, are coming very much in favour of the complainant, then isn't it prudent that from our point of view that we more likely, instead of challenging the complaints, is to accept them, so we actually cut the time down and save getting to the stage where it is dragged out and we end up having to fund out pay some funds out. And also the other issue for me is the longer the cases go on, the cost of officers' time. Do we factor that in? Do we know how much this increase is costing us? Because the longer it goes on, obviously, the more officer time it costs. Could you just highlight that? Thanks.
Yeah. So on the first point around looking to avoid the costs of ombudsman investigations, that's something that we are increasingly doing. I think in the slides there's reference made to approximately 10,500, which were actually settlements made pre-ombudsman, and that's really where the organisation looked at a number of cases that came through, very quickly realised based on final decisions already received that was likely to the case, and made those offers in line with the ombudsman's financial scale of remedy guidance to avoid that. That's continued through the current year in the sense of where appropriate. Certainly, I'm working with departments to make them much more aware of those guidance and are looking out for those cases where, as you say, all we are likely to do is increase cost and officer time in allowing it to go to ombudsman investigation. So that's certainly something that's happening. And we discuss routinely with departments and senior managers where we think those cases are relevant in that category. In terms of overall cost, difficult to quantify that. I haven't got any hard and fast data on that in terms of officer time spent on it, but as you rightly say, it is extensive. We know that, and certainly for those reasons, we look to really make sure we can avoid, wherever possible, taking pragmatic decisions, those cases escalating up there, because the cost does just does mount up for sure.
All right, Alan. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay. The only other member I'd got, I'm not sure that this was on from the last report, David Bill.
No, sorry, Chairman.
No, yours was on. Okay. Right. So everyone who wanted to ask a question has. This is an annual report which comes each year. I think you have picked up that there is a concern about the trend going in the wrong direction. You have said before in previous reports that it is inevitable, really, that the reductions in resources across the council is going to have an impact on, you mentioned this in highways, of people's expectations and not enough resources to deliver. So I think we need to keep a close eye on this going forward, and I hope that the measures you've talked about, particularly with regard to special educational needs, is going to lead to an improvement in the situation, but by which I mean a reduction in the number of complaints going forward. So I think this is an area of work we will need to continue to monitor closely. Presumably at any point in the year, you, whilst you haven't done a full report, you keep a record of where you are at any one time, say 3 months, 6 months and 9 months and so on. So you monitor this more frequently than annually. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that's correct. We routinely feed quarterly updates into the departments around how they're performing, but it can be even more regular than that. The data we have ability to monitor the data and look at trends dynamically through the year, but absolutely quarterly reports are typical.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you also to Roderick for coming this morning and being patient to present this report. That completes all the items that we need to deal with this morning. Can I just, before I close the meeting, remind you, I know we've made a number of references to the next meeting of the Commission scheduled to take place on Monday. Please note Monday, the 14th of September, starting at 10 o'clock. This will, I'm quite certain, continue into the afternoon, and this afternoon session has been booked for continuing after lunch. We will be joined by the Leader of the Council, the Finance Portfolio, Byron Rhodes, and also the Deputy Leader, given that we'll be focusing on some very big and significant issues for the County Council, namely the devolution white paper as expected, yet to materialise, the MTFS refresh, and of course the planning white paper that we've touched on a number of occasions. So I'm going to close the meeting now, and as I say, just remind you that we're going to have a busy day a week on Monday. Thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
Bye.
Bye.